and then we can, Chairman, you can start the meeting when we're ready. I think we still have a minute or two.
About 2 minutes.
53 seconds.
Okay, it is 6 o'clock. I'd like to call the September 25th, 2008 Planning Commission meeting to order. Can we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Garrett,
Here.
Hempel,
Here.
Lane,
Here.
Manson,
Present.
Schultz,
Here.
Fisher,
Here.
and McPherson is absent this evening.
In your packet, you also got the meeting minutes from last meeting. Has everybody had a chance to review those? And did anybody find any modifications or corrections that need to be made? If not, I would entertain a motion and a second to approve those minutes.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item C, disclosure of conflicts of interest. Does anybody have any conflicts of interest on any business in front of the commission tonight? Hearing none, we'll move on to item D, disclosure of outside communications regarding commission business. Anything that's in front of us. Okay.
I did have a discussion with one of the councilmen on the sign that's being proposed, the signage, so.
Can you tell us? the
He was
gist
just
of-
basically explaining the signage and how he thought it would enhance the city.
So what I've heard is the modifications in red in our packet by this person
Mhm.
were thought, and he saw those, he read them evidently.
He was actually the one that talked to Travis. So he was just advising me that he thought it was a really good thing for the city, and we just discussed it, so.
You didn't give him an opinion then? I
No.
hope not. Okay, that's important, you know, if you start giving, yeah, well, I can support that. you
No,
know.
absolutely not. I just,
We hear it all right here.
right.
Okay. So we had a discussion, it was positive, it was the person who wrote, who authored these, or?
I don't think he authored it, he just proposed it.
Yeah,
Okay.
A change.
I think what's important here at disclosure of outside communications is that she just, Commissioner Lane explains that she did have a communication with a council member, and most importantly, that it didn't, that you're still open to the discussion, that you haven't made your mind up on the issue as a result of that discussion, that you can still judge the matter impartially.
Correct.
Okay, well, I will consider items C and D to be acceptable to myself as well as other planning commission members. And our next item is item 4, call to public. Members of the public who wish to address the planning commission regarding items not on our agenda may do so at this time. Any presentation is for information only, and there's a limit of 4 minutes. So does anybody out there want to come up and say what's on their mind? Not about any project, just, okay, so seeing none, we'll move on to item A. It's public hearing for rezoning from light industrial to business general for Jake's Fireworks. And the way we will do this is we'll have staff report, and then we'll open the meeting up to the public. And we are now in public session.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. What you have before you, agenda item 5A, is a public hearing to consider a rezoning request from M1 Light Industrial to C2 Business General. This is an item, it's on Commerce Drive in Soto, right next to the Super 8, just east of that property. Property doesn't have an address assigned to it yet, so that's why I've been referring to it as east of the Super 8. I think that probably actually would have been easier to identify than if I just gave you some sort of address off of Commerce Drive, but we will have to address the address issue at some time soon, and that's really a pretty basic task. I just want to go through a little bit of the application background. The applicant and the representative is here tonight, and they will also do a follow-up presentation during the public hearing before you open it up for questions to planning commissioners and other interested citizens. We did get this application on late August. We did meet with the applicant. We did go through the process. We looked at their site plan, which you'll also be looking at later this evening tonight. One of the things that's important to know about this is going to actually be a combination of uses. While the property is going to have a sign on it that says Jake's Fireworks, the fireworks will only be sold during, obviously, the time around 4th of July holidays, and the remaining 50 or so weeks of the year it will be a recreation center it'll have batting cages. I can do some training for soccer and some smaller things like that, but it is going to be some sort of athletic sports recreation training facility for the preponderance of its time during the year. And so that's how staff really approached it. We did look in to make sure that we did consult with Steve Chick, our building official, to make sure that the permitting on the fireworks would still be appropriate and could be completed while also having this type of use. And we did go through that process, that check and balance, and it is something that we can't allow within the city of DeSoto. Of course, we went through the typical process. We notified surrounding property owners, sent out letters, put up a sign, all those types of things. Right now, we have the owner of the Super 8's the only person, Raj, that has contacted me, and he certainly got a strong interest in this project as being a neighbor of the item before you. As far as going through the zoning, the existing zoning, it is M1, as a lot of the properties are along Commerce Drive. Some of them did change to C2. Some of them, like the Pizza Hut and the bank and actually the Minute Mart, are actually still M1. M1. They got a special use permit and stayed within that zoning category. But the reason why the applicant, when our discussions with them, changed or opted to go for a C2 zoning is because, and Linda, I included our zoning districts in the back, and I would have just taken a snapshot of them, but the M1 and the C2 are, I mean, they cover so many different uses and districts that I just printed off the whole thing in there. But for this use to be allowable by right, the fireworks and the recreation aspect, it really needs to be in the C2 category. It couldn't work with just staying M1 and doing a special use permit because the fireworks sale wouldn't be allowed.
Could you
So,
repeat that again? It would not be allowed for a special use permit under M1?
correct. Yeah, if you go back to, and I highlighted the page, the amusement and recreation, this is on page 15, amusement and recreation industries would be allowed by special use permit, but the fireworks sales or miscellaneous store retails, which is what I put because we didn't really define, that's actually not even allowed under M1 by a special use permit.
Page 50. You got to
It's page 15, 15 and
Write
11,
that down.
pardon me. 15 shows the uses for amusement and recreation industries, which would be allowed in M1, but it's also actually permitted by right on C2. And then if you go to page 11, you'll see that miscellaneous store retailers is not allowed under M1, and it is permitted under C2. So I think that made the decision for the applicant pretty easy to say, well, we're going to just change the zoning. And there is Harps is C2, the McDonald's is C2. So there's commercial And it's really probably more set up for this part of Commerce Drive to be a business general type land use anyway. So it really does make sense that they pursued the C2 zoning category. I also have included on page 2 the existing zoning map. We just kind of covered that, and then the surrounding aerial photo where you can see the land use. There is a little bit of the apartment complex is, you can see it's barely on the land use or on the aerial photo, and also the subdivision just to the north of Harps is still there, but this land use really isn't going to affect those developments at all in any way, shape, or form, at least staff's humble opinion. I'm going to go through the review of the zoning compatibility factors. First of all, the character of the neighborhood. I did touch on a little bit of this as going through the discussion. It really does include a commercial and light industrial uses. It does fit quite well within those types of this setting. Don't see any reason why there would be any detrimental effect to this. It does fit the compatibility of the proposed zoning and uses permitted therein. It is consistent. The suitability of the uses which the property has been restricted under existing zoning. It really wasn't restricted by anything. It just had been vacant for quite some time, hadn't really found the right tenant or use, and so it has been empty for quite a while. And then obviously has never been built upon, so it's a green grass site. The extent at which there's a need in the community for the uses allowed, obviously there is fireworks sales that do happen within the city of DeSoto. This one is new in the sense that it would be a permanent structure, be indoor, air conditioned, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a little bit different, but once again, it's only going to be a 2-week or so period of the year. The recreational use.
Brad, can you go back to the fireworks?
Sure.
Okay, many adjacent communities have outlawed fireworks.
Right.
Not sure why, roofs on fire or whatever. You go down to the Ozarks, you go up I-29, get close to Iowa, you see the fireworks sign, big places. Walnut bowls and fireworks. Is there a chance DeSoto in a few years decides they don't like fireworks anymore? What is that?
Well,
What
you're
kind of position are we, or is there any implications there?
Well, I suppose there could be, but I guess, I don't want to borrow trouble. We don't know what's could happen in 2 years.
Sure.
But we have to look at this, wonder what we currently allow, and certainly future councils and planning commissions can make adjustments and changes. But at this point, our kind of focus is on what we currently allow and how it would fit within that land use or that zoning category. So there is a potential. I suppose the council could make a change, but I guess on the other side of that, it would only affect them, 2 months or 2 weeks out of the year. And it seems like lately, Richard, that cities have been going the other way. They've been allowing sales, not disallowing them.
Okay.
As far as environmental impacts, I was going to address the auto parking. Pardon me, backing up the utilities. There's ample capacity for the utilities, and water, sewer, gas are all exist in the area. There won't be any additional heavy usage or taxation upon these utilities that are in the area. All parking will be on site, even though when you look at the site plan, I don't want to try to mix these too much because they are separate issues. All parking will be for the on-site at the proposed facility. During the higher use, certainly during fireworks sales, there could be, and that's where we're a little bit unclear on how much traffic volume might be coming through there. We just have to keep an eye on it and monitor the situation. If it really got to a point where it's a challenge, we might have to engage a sheriff's deputy or something to be out there and parking, but that's, once again, we won't know any of these things until we're actually up and running, and didn't really feel that there's any reason to require the applicant to submit a traffic impact study. Don't see any reasons why there'll be any significant impacts to the environment on this due to this development.
fire chief is not, this really doesn't involve him at all.
It really doesn't.
Building codes,
Our-
this is just.
Right now, our building official is the one that issues the permits for the fireworks. And if you got anything else, Mike,
No, I mean, Jake's Fireworks has had a tent in the city for at least 5 years. I mean, every year basically. And generally, those are temporary structures, and we have separation distances from other uses and gas stations and things like that would still apply to a permanent structure. So in that context, we've looked at that, and this site is as good as any for that type of use, for that week and a half that fireworks sales are allowed.
So this is a permanent structure with fireworks in it. They won't
I
be
guess it's.
stored.
I guess.
Or am
at
I?
this- I don't. Yeah. At this point, when we're talking about the rezoning, we should be careful not to couch our discussions around the next item on the agenda, which is the site plan.
Yeah.
If we're rezoning to C2, then we're allowing whatever uses that are allowed in C2 by right. So we really need to look at all the uses that are allowed in C2 and base our decision on what's the allowable uses in M1 compared to the allowable uses in C2, and is that property right change reasonable and appropriate?
Yeah.
So getting too far into the weeds with the actual fireworks sales and all that, probably the next item we can.
yeah, it
really
is
dig
kind
into
of hard to
that.
keep from wanting to make that jump because we do have this the site plan as the next agenda
This is
item.
it's pretty common that we have this dual application process.
Well, yeah, I understand that, but it's hard not to.
Yeah, I guess another thing, and I should have pointed this out earlier in my presentation. The applicant actually is considering splitting their property. So, because when you look at the site plan, you'll see that there is a piece that's going to remain vacant, and because of that, they felt they had better flexibility as far as potential sales or whatever they may choose to do. So. That's also going to be part of the site plan discussion, but as Mike pointed out, the zoning change will affect or change that entire tract, even though the applicant is considering a lot split, that they may break off that piece for another use at some time later. But as Mike points out, it is about the change to C2 and that allowable category that you really need to be focusing on when we're talking about the rezoning of this tract of property. To the extent in which the zoning amendment may detrimentally affect the nearby property, don't see any detrimental effect on properties. We did evaluate, and once we had our discussions with the applicant on looking at the C2 and the M1, and I touched on the reasons for that and how it really was a better fit to go to C2. This portion basically from Harps West is all commercial usage. It is consistent with our comprehensive plan, the utilities, facility plans, capital plans, and we've just spent some money on Commerce Drive resurfacing it. It's certainly in good shape and ready to have additional users in that area. Finally, the recommendation of our staff is once again, it's our recommendation is to approve the zoning request, but we will stand for any questions and turn it over to you, Mr. Chairman.
Does anybody have any questions of staff at this point in time?
Brad, I was just wondering, like the VFW and the schools, they sell fireworks, and they have to come up and get a permit. Will we
Yes.
have to come up and get a permit to,
Yes.
okay.
I'm just curious, why this name on a 50-week recreation building?
Well, if you'd like to ask the applicant those questions, that's
Well,
fine, but once again,
Yeah,
that's kind of a question for maybe the next topic, Richard. What their business plan is and some of those things, but even that isn't particularly affect on the site plan what they're building. We did check the sign and the requirements for that. It does meet our standards for signs. They can have a sign on every side of the building, but clearly the west side is gotta be right by the Super 8, so that's kind of not necessary.
Okay. Well, I have no further questions or at this point in time, so if, is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak for or against the zoning
You want to
change?
make a statement or two? I mean, I don't know if you want to have the audience or the applicant make
Well, this
it.
is the public hearing portion. It can be either person, either somebody who is the applicant for or against this zoning change.
All right. My name's Justin Milburn. I'm with Milburn Civil Engineering. I'm the actual civil engineer for the Jake's Fireworks project. I just want to say on the rezoning, I'm going to present the site plan on the next agenda item. But on the rezoning, I'm working with the owner that owns the rest of the vacant ground adjacent to this land. Actually, I was working on a concept plan today for that other vacant land. And the rezoning of this lot to C2 would really fit in with the concept plan that I'm working on. So I think by rezoning that to C2, it would fit in with the future development of the vacant ground, adjacent to this property. So that's all I got on that one.
Yeah, I know our Strahler and Associates was saying that this was prime real estate right across the street from Harbs, and that this has got a commanding visual from the interstate. You know?
Yeah.
It's the image of DeSoto driving along.
Right.
And so C2 fits better in that. I mean, we could do a lot worse than a C2 zoning.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
So
you could have somebody wanting to go the other way to heavy industry. So
right. So I guess future.
that part's good.
Yes. So it'd fit great with the future concept plan.
Okay. So we will hear more from you on the site plan review.
Right. Correct.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Anybody else like to speak on the rezoning for or against? Okay. Well, I will close the public hearing portion of this rezoning topic. And the name, I'll go first. The name catches me off guard a little bit. You know what I mean? Like I know this is just a rezoning, but it's like up in Lawrence, there was this place, this old negligee, and it's called Naughty But Nice, and they kept coming up to the city council, and they'd make them, they'd shut them down, and they changed the name to Priscilla's, and they got approved. The name's got me bugged a little bit, but then again, we're just talking about a name here, so that's but I think the zoning fits. This is the image of DeSoto, so it's important what we put down there, I think, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'll chime in and say, this is Todd speaking, but, I don't think this rezoning is handcuffing the property. I actually think it makes it more usable for long-term, so in the event that, heaven forbid, the business doesn't succeed or something doesn't work, the property is still available to be used for multiple uses long-term. So, just because it says, we're just talking property right now, so property use-wise, I don't see that that's a problem from my standpoint, so.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah, that makes pretty good sense. Then nobody really has any objections because it is the property and it is the C2.
It's a good-looking building.
Yeah, it is a decent.
It's a really nice-looking building.
Yeah. So,
Richard, you might want to phone tree, man. I need to do a call to public. One guest if you'd like to speak during the public hearing.
okay, I thought I already asked that.
I
but-
think he did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The minutes reflect that he did.
Okay.
So that's my reflection.
Raj,
that-
do you?
Is there anybody there in the audience that would like to speak? Okay, so, hearing no objections, is there anybody who would like to make a motion for, make sure I get this right, recommendation to the city council of approval of the rezoning from M1 light industrial to C2 business?
Motion to approve.
I'd second that.
We have a motion, Elaine, a second. We've got a motion to approve right over here. If we could have a roll call vote, please.
Yes. Manson?
Yes.
Garrett?
Yes.
Hemphill?
Yes.
Lane?
Yes.
Schultz?
Yes.
Fisher?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Okay, motion carries. That was agenda item 5A. Now, we will move to old business. I don't believe there's any old business in front of us. We'll move to new business. And item 7A is the site plan for Jake's Fireworks. If we could have staff report, please.
All right, thanks, Richard. Yeah, before you, the site plan prepared by Milburn Associates for the building on Commerce Drive that will house Jake's Fireworks and the recreation training facility. I'm going to go through our site plan considerations, and we did go through the detailed process of looking at our code and checking the parking lot and all the items that are laid out as far as what we have to do for approval of the site plan. I did want to remind you that and we talked about some of these things at our last meeting, but site plan approval is the sole purview of the planning commission. This won't go to the city council. This is your baby. So anything that needs to be changed or amended, if you feel like there's some comments you'd like to make, this is the time to do that. Anyway, I'll run through the site plan considerations that staff went through. First of all, density, it's not applicable. There's no housing. The general layout, as we talked about, sports, recreation, and training. There'll also be fireworks sales. One of their concerns with the project was, during the 4th of July when there's going to be a lot of activity. Will this be Commerce Drive is starting to get fairly busy. There's starting to become a lot of curb cuts, things like that. We need to start looking at and making sure we're not starting to overtax the road. And once again, we'll just have to monitor the situation and make sure that during this 2-week period that nobody's parking on the street, nobody's parking in the public right-of-way, things like that, and that they're staying on the parking lot that's provided by Jake's Fireworks. Utilities, once again, are all adequate. There's ample utilities for development in this area. It won't hinder any future growth for any of the utilities that are in the area. Stormwater, the property actually drains to the south and east. It'll actually go into the drainage ditch for K-10 highway. So none of the adjacent private property owners should have any concerns about stormwater running onto their properties. Also, per our code, if that were an issue, they'd have to detain on site. And they have completed a drainage study, which Mike has reviewed and concurred with the findings that Justin put together, that it does meet our criteria. And so no additional concerns are for stormwater. We did have some discussion about the architectural elements, and I will say the applicant, they were very good to work with. When they had their initial submittal, we went kind of back and forth and actually came up with a plan. I also suggested having a rendering, which they did in 3D, which is really nice. Some of the items that are good is they're going to have metal grooved panels on the upper area, split faced concrete masonry units on the lower area. They also added, we talked about some additional relief to the building, but they went ahead and added the facade areas with these sort of exploding fireworks on it, which I thought was a nice feature. The architectural screening panels, also the entries are glass panel, not just a standard door or a small door with a window on it. They actually wrapped around the side of the building with some of the entry feature in the glass.
Hey Brad, can you tell us which which of those elevations heads which way on this.
Okay, all right, what we're looking at now would be the west elevation. I mean, you're facing west. And then-
Facing into the hill.
This is
Well-
the east side of the building.
East side of the building out of the
Oh.
parking lot.
Yeah,
Looking west.
right. And this would be the view from
Across the street from ours, but it's.
Commerce Drive right here on what you're looking at right now.
That's the skinny end of the building. The driveway comes right down, and that's what you see coming down the entry drive.
Yes, that is correct. And then this would be the
That
side,
would
if
be
you were on
considered
the,
front.
yeah, if you were in the Super 8's parking lot towards K10, this is what you would see from that.
This is the southwest corner of the building.
Right.
So they get
So in
the-
addition to the architectural screening on the front of the buildings, which we were primarily talking about, they added it on the back corner as well. Because we do have some additional requirements for along the K10 corridor, but they've actually exceeded them with some of the architectural elements they've added.
So can you tell me what that screen, or should I be asking these of the applicant or?
Well, we can, yeah, you can do that. I'm just going to go through my staff report, and then they're going to make their presentation, so it might be.
Better ask.
yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, back to some of the architectural details. So we've talked a little bit about the elevations that are in the renderings that are in the site plan packet. Exterior lighting, there will be exterior lighting on the building. There'll be sconces shielding the light. It'll be shining downward on sidewalk areas. There will be some lighting in the parking lot. There will be a couple lighting poles to illuminate the parking lot for safety. Pedestrian access has a 10-foot wide sidewalk in front of the building, and also as a concession, they also actually added the 5-foot sidewalk from Commerce Drive down that property as well. We did talk about the landscaping. They're mulching all the area around the parking lot and meet our criteria, and actually exceed our criteria in many ways with the landscaping and the planting of trees around the building, and also along K10, which we do have some additional buffering that goes along K10 highway. All the items I talked about meet or exceed our code. So staff's recommendation is approve the site plan. Of course, you do have the latitude to make some judgments on the nature and some of the things that you may want to see added or see fit would be important for this item. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I will stand for any questions, or can ask the applicant to make their presentation as well.
Well, just a general question. The materials on the exterior, and I will ask this of the applicant, but they're consistent with the masonry requirements that we have.
Yes.
And you've got some height variation going on, and some elevation variation going on to create some interest.
Yeah, we actually had quite a few conversations with the architect as far as just going back and forth on, we talked about some columns maybe out in the front and a canopy and things like that, just to get some more depth and visual interest to the building. And also, even when we talked about the backside of the building along K10 Highway, I mean, they were very receptive and actually took our comments and kind of took them to another level.
Okay, and this just need an opinion from you. This building looks to me like it's 24 feet 8 tall from grade to the top of the parapet at the uphill side. Has anybody just done a visual, and that will not in any way block? I know they can build whatever our code allows them to build, but that height will not block the visual from the freeway from K10 to Harp's Pizza Hut, will it?
Well, I mean, obviously it is a mass, so it will block some of the view, but actually K10, the highway is actually fairly elevated at that point.
Yeah.
And you'll still see above it to some degree. But it won't
It would
be,
seem to me.
but it
would
won't,
seem to
it's
me it
not
would
gonna be a massive structure that just totally,
Yeah.
is overwhelming. It certainly won't be that at all.
It's a lot less
Yeah,
vertical height than the motel. The motel looks to be 35, 40 feet.
Yeah, I think
About
35 feet, Mike, is the height. Okay. Okay.
I think that's our code, isn't it?
35 is the maximum in C.
So this is even low, this is lower than, so yeah, I mean, just
It's
my
eight-
opinion, it's a pretty, you still have a pretty good visual of.
I think there's about 8 foot of grade separation. Justin, maybe you know. Like these contours along here. So finished floor is 840. And I think we have. I can speak to this one. Okay. Super 8 looks like it's 848.
So, Brad, is there proposed landscaping adequate, you feel, at the back of the property to K-10? I mean, it looks like
Yes.
there's some existing shrubbery along, or whatever.
Yeah.
Volunteer stuff along.
Yeah, some of that will get cleared out when they're doing the grading for the stormwater, but they're adding, as you can see, the four, or actually 5 trees on the backside in addition to the parking lot buffering. So the additional requirement that we have for the landscaping along K-10 is met.
Okay, so what I'm looking at is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 trees along K-10, 4 more along the side. I mean, shade, or
Total of 19 trees.
big
What I read.
trees,
Yes.
and a total of 19.
Mhm.
Okay, does anybody else have any questions at this point in time?
Is this going to block any of, his motel?
Well, as far as, I'm not sure what you mean by blocking it.
Well,
I
it
mean,
looks like
it's,
it's 28 feet from, is there a 28-foot setback?
I-
Mike, can you pull that Harps, or that Google map back up, please, so we can take a look at that? Yes, thank you.
so yeah, Bob, you're right. There's a 28-foot setback.
Right, that's where they're gonna start. So what's the motel? How far back is it set?
It's quite a bit farther than that, actually. It looks like it might be, 60 feet or so.
Well, technically, this building's gonna shadow.
Well, it is, but we just talked about it. It's going to be 10 feet lower, and I don't think it's as tall as the Super 8 as well. Its finished floor elevation is less, so
The elevation itself is lower too, isn't it? So by the time, isn't that ground, doesn't it slope off a little bit there?
yeah, it does. It slopes towards the south and east. Property does.
Looks like the motel parking lot slopes a couple feet,
Mhm.
and then our client is our proposed person here is sloping, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, another 5 feet. We can verify that when the civil engineer gets up here. So if we're sloping 2 feet plus another 5, we're 7 or 8 feet below at our starting point at 24 feet tall. I understand what you're saying, Bob, that it does, I don't know of any criteria that we've got about, you know what I mean, blocking.
Or sign?
I would hope it would not, but I'm trying to think of criteria.
Well, as far as, on this, it looks like it is.
You're looking at,
C-01.
oh, the way it sits out, it's closer to the interstate.
Well, you can see that the sign for the Super 8's in the first peak, and if you look at the first page of the site plan, I can see where there could be somewhat of a visual block to the sign, but and the only way to figure that out would be to actually go out and measure the base of the sign, and then see where the elevation of the building would potentially be.
Does your Google map show an elevation of the motel?
I was trying to pull up an oblique view here on the county's website. It doesn't appear to be working.
Seems to me that the signs are up in
Yeah,
as
they
high
are.
as you could get them.
Yeah, they are in the peak of the Super 8.
Yeah, I don't know if this is going to work here. I don't know why. I think the best thing we have is this.
But I think we need to be careful to not just say it or discuss not building a building because we can't see somebody's sign that's existing next to a vacant property.
And I agree. I mean,
I mean,
look where they positioned this building at. They kept it to the side of the property. You got visibility to Harps. Unless somebody buys that lot and builds something there, we can't restrict what's being built.
Yeah, that's
So
true.
there's no, they meet probably all the standards, so.
I mean, yeah, I mean, he went through and stated
Yeah.
all the requirements as required by a site development, so, you know, we can't just say you can't build a building because you can't see somebody's sign that's
Exactly.
fortunate to have it visible
Yeah,
for
that's
so
true.
long. But
Okay, and you flip it to the other side, what happens when the guy next to it tries to build a building and we're in the same position, so, I mean,
Well, I think it's important to bring up every aspect of this, because we're the owners of this. When we vote on this tonight, it's law.
yeah,
It doesn't go before the city council or anything. So we need to make sure we cover all of our bases, not only for his right and for his right.
right.
Yeah.
It looks like the
And-
bottom of the Super 8 sign is about 16 feet off the ground.
That's why I thought you can see it up in the ridge there, in the
Yeah,
peak.
and the top of the peak, peak looks like 35 feet
Yeah.
off the parking lot.
So the building is 24 feet and it's 10 feet lower. The base elevation, you still might be able to see the sign over the top of the Jake's Fireworks.
You aren't gonna have the clear view that they do now, but no matter what goes in,
Yeah.
it's going to have some obstruction to it.
The only way the Super 8 can control the visuals to buy the land. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's, if they want, they're not, no, I haven't even heard anybody complain. We're just thinking for them. But the only way they can control that land is to
You're
own it.
right.
And we do, we just trying to make sure everybody's playing fair and
If you had a-
So
nobody's stepping on
I'd like to
anybody
hear
else's toes.
from Raji how he feels about this site plan and so
Sure.
forth.
Okay. Have you completed your?
Yeah, I'm completed, man. Of course, the applicant would like to address the planning commission as well, so,
No other questions at this point in time. We can come back to staff.
sure, absolutely.
Okay, is there anybody in the audience who'd like to come up and speak about this project?
All right, good evening again. Justin Milburn with Milburn Civil Engineering. I'm the civil engineer on this project. To my left is Mr. Eric Easter. He's with Jake's Fireworks. He can answer any questions in regards to the operation of the business, and then any questions you might have in regards to the building, he can help address those. Before I forget, let's just talk about this side issue. I knew this would come up, right? So I looked at it. Can you go to the other side plan?
You just want the regular site plan?
Yeah. I looked at the elevation of K10 on the east property line, which would be this location right here. It's roughly about 845, 846 elevation on K10 if you're driving westbound.
Perpendicular to the property.
Yeah,
Right.
on the east property line.
Okay.
So the finished floor elevation that we're proposing right now is about 840.
5 feet lower
Yeah. Yes.
than the freeway.
Yeah. At this point right here. So K10's coming back up grade as you go west. Okay. So this elevation over here at Super 8 is 850. So the finished floor elevation of the Super 8 is about 850 plus or minus. So then that sign would be up 16 feet, so it'd be 866 is what that elevation would be. But in my opinion, I don't see any hindrance on that sign from K10. So I mean, the top of the base fire would be about probably about the same. Yes. So that would be on the east property line. As you keep going westbound on K10, you're going back up grade. So it's really visible as you go west of this property line right there.
Okay, what is the, and I don't know if this is a question for you, Mr. Milburn, but the little solid blue rectangle on the bottom, is that some heating, ventilating equipment or?
Right. Let me step back. Let me do my presentation first. I wanted to get that addressed before I forgot all about it.
Okay.
Zoom down just a little bit.
Scroll down or
Scroll,
zoom in?
Scroll up, I guess. Zoom out just a little bit. This lot here is actually, this lot's been platted. It's a K10 business park plat. The lot is roughly about 230 foot wide, 360 foot deep. Like Brad mentioned, the existing ground slopes back towards the southeast with an existing culvert that goes under K10. It's about a 3.5 foot tall by 5 foot wide culvert that takes storm drainage from Harps and then any local drainage from the vacant ground south of Commerce Drive. We're proposing to access the property off of Commerce Drive with a 24 foot wide asphalt drive. We're going to pave everything to the east property line, so the development east of the Jake's Fireworks can tie into that drive. The building, like you mentioned, is the blue outline. Then this square south of the building is for HVAC equipment. That's for. The building itself is 60 foot wide by 120 foot long, so roughly 7,200 square feet is the actual building footprint area. So based on that dimension, the required parking is 36 stalls. The site plan shows 37 is what we have. Of the 37 stalls, 2 of those are ADA accessible.
How many stalls per square foot does that?
Maybe 1 per 200.
One for every 200. There's 7,200 square feet.
So 36 is the minimum requirement. We got 37. Okay. So we're going to access the parking lot. Actually, let me step back. The doors for the building are on the northeast corner. If you can show some of those renderings, Mike, I'll show, kind of get everybody oriented. Again, this is here. So that elevation there is sitting in the parking lot here looking back to the southwest. And then the main entrance is at the northeast corner. It should be right back, foot back on.
It's around the corner.
Yeah, so the main entrance is right here at the northeast corner of the building. There'll be a roll-up door on the southeast side of the building. And then this is more or less looking, as you drive down the access drive into the property.
Mr. Milburn, are you the person that I can ask questions about? Is there another person here on the materials?
It'll probably have to be Mr. Easter.
All right, well, I'll wait then.
Okay. And here, this would be the back side, like you say over there, looking from the Super 8 building. And then this is kind of looking from K10 as you're driving westbound. If you can head back to the site plan real quick. Talk a little bit about utilities and then answer any questions you may have. So there's an existing water line along the south side of Commerce Drive. It's an 8-inch line. Going to extend the water line into the property along the east side of the access drive, then extend it on the north side tie into that water line on this side develops. Sanitary sewer, there's an existing line coming from Harps going south. There's an existing line that goes back to the east, over towards Hudumaki. We're gonna set a sanitary sewer manhole over that existing line. And the sanitary sewer will come out of the building at the northeast corner of the building. Storm drainage, we're gonna set an inlet on the north side of the access drive, so the future development of this lot can tie into that storm sewer inlet. This side here is gonna be the low side of the parking lot. All the water will drain towards this inlet in the southeast corner, and will discharge into the existing culvert on the north side of Cape Town.
Can you tell me where the front yard is for setback, front yard setback and side yard setback?
Okay, in theory, it would be,
It's shown right here,
yeah,
building setback. Now, when you plat, it might change.
actually, this one's already platted.
Well, if you replat,
If you replat. this
we'll have to
could
make
be
sure that that the setbacks are met by the replat. So in this scenario, we have one lot, it's fronting on Commerce Drive, so the front yard setback is shown here, 50 feet along the front. I don't know if that's the minimum for the C2, I think C2 is
25.
25, so it'd be half of that. The rear yard setback is along K10.
That's 50 feet, right? In the
Well,
rear yard, 50.
no,
Rear
I
yard
don't
is 20
believe
on the
so.
C2.
Rear yard is 20, yeah.
So there's a 28-foot easement right there today, because this is platted. So there's an easement on the south side, it's 28 feet. And then right now, since it is the M1, or not anymore, it's C2 now, but the setback for that is
Setback for,
50.
yeah, for M1 is 50, but C2 is 25.
Okay, well, I'm a little this is one, we're replanting that whole rectangle, all that vacant land up there because, right, to get this,
Well-
you're using that for setback?
Well, we're not replatting anything.
Or, excuse me, let me back up. Your proposal, the setback of your proposal, your property line is clear out to the front.
Right, so right now, the existing property line is right there, here's the right-of-way line. And then this dashed black line is the existing property line as it is today. So once this is all constructed, Jake's is gonna dedicate an easement for access and everything, but we don't plan
Is
on.
that a public street then?
Well, it'll have an access easement over it, so it can be used by, the public.
As proposed, that will not be a public improvement, no.
Okay, so staff's good with the apparent no front yard setback. You know what I mean? The visual, you drive down there, well, how come this building doesn't have a setback and this other one does? You know what I'm saying? But the caveat to that is the setback is measured from Commerce Drive setback. And this is that contiguous piece of land.
Right, so currently the setback's 50.
Okay. So that gets that will have a tough time carving out as a separate parcel, and it won't, right? I'm just throwing it out there.
That's a question I would ask now. If you replat that to two individual lots, will your lot meet the required setback from the new property line?
So I guess it really depends on how you look at the orientation of the building. If you say this is the front yard, this is where the building is oriented, this would be, in theory, from my perspective, this would be the front yard, this would be the side yard. The side yard setback on the C2 zoning is 0
Gotcha.
when it's not abutting to residential.
So that answers my question. When you replat is the plan, right? So you will meet the requirements.
Well, that's not our,
Well,
for Eric, but that's not our plan, is to replat this north area.
Well-
And somebody goes and buys that,
Right.
if they can't get their building fit in that setback line, then they could go replat that at that time.
so what I'm getting at is your building that you're proposing to build will meet the requirements when you replat your lots to two, right? The other lot doesn't matter. You can make it whatever size, or you won't be able to replat if it's not appropriately sized, but, right?
Correct me if I'm wrong, I don't see why we'd have to replat ours.
Well, you're saying you're gonna make that into two lots, right? Is your long-term plan, correct?
Right, we're gonna put, we can just do this by, correct me if I'm wrong on this. just do a lot split.
Yeah, so the way we look at this currently is that this access, that drive that we're showing now is an interior access drive, privately owned, private maintained. There's no setback requirement from that interior drive. It's the same thing as the drive that goes past the J Mart back to the car wash.
Right.
It's an interior circulation drive.
Right.
If they want another pad site there, they could put another building there on the lot. And if they want that ownership separate, then they could plat out or split this lot once, just by a meets and bounds split, or they could replat the entire thing. In which case, the replat, this building will have to meet all the setbacks. Wherever that property line goes, this building will have to meet setbacks. Now, to Richard's point, it's gonna maybe look and feel like this is a public street and this building isn't set back from the public street, but in reality, this will just be an access ride through a larger development.
Basically just a long driveway.
Yeah, I mean, similar to what you see in other, shopping retail centers off of, in larger, more dense areas of Johnson County. Dick's Sporting Goods isn't set back from the access drive that goes in front of it once you leave, the main boulevard. So that's how we're viewing this. In the future, if there's replatting done, we'll have to make sure that the property, the setbacks are appropriate for the zoning district.
I guess maybe the root of my question was to make sure that not looking at their interest, but if your plan is to dump half the property to redevelop, that, you've got everything looked at long term. So that was the only
So
root
where's
of
the
my
front,
question.
where's the front yard? Or am I asking the right guy?
I think you are.
Okay, where's the front yard?
If we go back and have a property line right here, in my opinion, the front yard would be here. This is the orientation of the building.
But
Okay.
under your current proposed, what we're voting on
Okay.
right now, front yard is
Up here.
up there.
Up there.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah, we just want to make sure we keep that clear. That
Okay, today.
under today's
okay.
circumstance, that's
Yeah,
what we
no-
need to talk
okay,
about
yeah.
today is
No property
today.
line here.
Right.
Current standard. Front yard's there.
Perfect.
Okay, so the next group, the next planning commission group, when you say, this is my front yard now, moving it to the parking lot, aren't there requirements for green space in front of a building for the front yard? You know what I'm getting at?
Well, I think
The next group can work that out.
when we administer the zoning regulations, if we're going to consider a front yard, the front yard is adjacent to whatever public street it's on. So in this scenario, it's possible that they want to replat and carve off some of that half acre up to the north, but it's also possible that it remains all one lot, and those are lease tenant sort of arrangements with a new commercial pad site. This happens all the time. Home Depot or Walmart goes in and they've got parking lot pad sites there. It's one parcel, and it's just the land property is leased. So in that case, the front setback will always be along Commerce. Unless this becomes a public road in the future, which I don't see that happening, the front setback will always be along Commerce.
Okay, so we're good with front yard landscaping as this sits, front yard to the top.
To the top, yeah.
Okay. Well, because I know over at the USD School District building over here on Commerce Drive on the other side, that we had a big deal about it, the way it had to go at an angle, and we had to choose the front side, and it made a big difference in their plan, so. Okay. Any other questions at this point in time? For staff, I think they explained it pretty well. That the gist of it for me was that it sits low, comparison to the adjacent property, comparison to the interstate. So I don't think we're blocking the visual of Harps, or we're blocking a little bit to the neighbor over here, to the motel, but I don't think it, in my opinion, it's pretty diminutive. So we may come back to you, sir.
I do have one more question regarding the access road. You show it for future to pass through the property. Say somebody, I don't know the status of the next property, but if they buy the whole property lot, right, and want to build one large building, how does that affect the access road and to there, or?
I'm working with the landowner on this, that owns this property. We're literally working on that concept plan today.
Uh-huh.
And his vision is to have an access road that continues to the east of this property. That's his vision. So he doesn't have we don't have a plan that has that whole thing.
Right. I'm just saying, if his plan doesn't work out as designed, what's the plan for gapping off the access road on your property, or you know what I mean? I know he's got a plan for future development, but if somebody comes in with a chunk of money and says, I want to buy the whole thing and put this big building, then what happens to the access road? Because right now it just kind of goes over and dies.
Yeah, it'd just be dead. I mean, we could just dead end it right here so they could still access the parking lot.
And the fire department's good. Coming in, turning around, leaving on what you've got.
We
Yeah,
wouldn't-
no,
We
this-
wouldn't have any trouble.
Yeah.
Okay,
The parking lot is the turnaround.
all right.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good observation. That's a possibility. If something else occurs there, it could be that that's a dead end forever. Dead ends to the side of somebody's building.
Right.
He's kind of like you see occasionally with the subdivision.
Yeah.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, you could clean up the edge pretty easy and turn it into parking lot, and it just looks like access to your parking lot.
Or the sidewalks that go
That's-
nowhere.
I was curious.
Yeah. They got these big rototillers. Remove that kind of stuff. Can we complete this and then have you come up, sir? At this point in time, any further questions for our civil engineer?
Was your presentation done?
Okay, we may like to ask you more questions, but for right now, could we have anybody else in the audience? Please come up, and if you would state your name and address and say your piece, sir.
My name is Raj Patel. I'm owner of Super 8. And I have a question, not blocking the sign. That's the main concern. And does a CPT zone has how much from the property line to setback? How many feet?
The side setback from your
No,
property.
no. I'm just, can I go over there and say?
Yes.
Yes, please.
I want to see how much this property line up to over here, this building.
20 feet.
20 feet only?
Yes.
He's gonna definitely hide this sign from the highway.
Do we need to do the math again to,
We kind of figured he might clear by a couple of feet.
yeah. Well, an opinion, sir. It may block, depending on where you're at, driving by, it may block the bottom of your sign a little bit. But I can't, we determined it was, I wish we could get an elevation on the bottom of that sign.
I had it.
Okay,
Yeah,
it
yeah,
looks like, 2 stories, that's
The
roughly.
elevation, the bottom of the sign is 16 feet above the base of the building.
Okay, so there's 16.
And what did you say the base of the building was? 850?
850 roughly.
All right,
So the bottom of the sign is at
866.
866.
866.
So then our finished floor of the building is at 840. That's 24 foot tall. It would be 864.
840
So the
plus,
building is
plus
2
24.
feet below the bottom of the sign.
So it should still be accessible or visible over the top of the building.
Yes.
And then at some point, you do clear the building on K10 also before you.
Yeah, I think when the sign is visible, as far as somebody looking at the Super 8 sign, it's most visible when you're a quarter mile east, or maybe, even further, like down the road. That's when you're not going to be looking at it when you're perpendicular to it. It's kind of, so that's why maybe I should go even a little further back here. I don't know how visible it is. So here's a quarter mile back. You can't see it from the trees. So here's a step closer. Okay, so now it's clear of the trees. And so the The new building's gonna be kind of right where I'm rolling the cursor here, a couple feet below that sign. So you're gonna be able to see that. I believe you'll be able to see the sign over the top of this building. Regardless, even if you couldn't, there's nothing in our regulations that says.
Mr. Patel, you understand what we're saying? We don't have a reg that says thou shalt not block thy neighbor's sign.
Yeah.
We want to do the best we can for you.
Yeah.
Because you're,
But, it's a CP2 zoning, is only setback is only, if you have another type of zoning, you might be setback more.
Yeah. So yeah, the C2 is 20 feet. The M1 rear would be 30. So the site would almost meet that. It's 28 now.
Yeah, I mean, right
Going
now,
into
we're
more.
probably, it's over 30. Says
Oh, it is?
30.
Oh,
38.
I thought it
that
was
looks
28.
bigger.
It's showing 38 feet
Oh,
from
it's
the back of the
38.
property line.
It's 28.
Yeah.
28.
Yeah, 28 to there, so yeah.
But you
looks
said
like
Harps
you're right,
and
38.
McDonald's are already C2, so that's in line of what is already there.
And before I ask the applicant to come up, or the next person who can describe the building materials, do we have any further questions? Okay.
I have some, not questions on the building itself, materials, but some other questions, so.
Okay, well, if we,
Let's go ahead and talk to that one first.
okay, if we could have, you're the applicant, sir, or you're the proposed building owner? Can you come up and state your name, address, and tell us what you want to do, sir?
Eric Easter, Jake's Fireworks, 1500 East 27th Terrace. Just to back up on a little bit, try to touch a little bit of your issues. The reason it's a Jake's Fireworks building, it's called Jake's Fireworks. We've got around 75 brick and mortar retail stores from coast to coast. This is something that we have expanded. Me personally, in the last 8 years, I've done 55 of these, and we do them in all different states. And recently, we have added another aspect to it. You know, especially here, you sell 2 weeks a year. We really sell like that in most of our buildings. Some of them we open Memorial Day to Labor Day when they're allowed. But a lot of our buildings are just a small month season. So we've expanded, we've hired personnel to expand our operations to use a lot of our buildings when they're not occupied with fireworks. And this, we recently have one over in Topeka. That was the first concept that we did. We've got one back in our hometown in Pittsburgh, Kansas, that we're in the process of doing now. And then this was another one that we were going to do, where taking out the fireworks, putting in the turf, putting up the cages, putting everything in to make it a multi-use sports facility. So that hopefully that answers your question as to why it's a Jake's Fireworks and not a world-class sports, even though it is going to be the sports facility most of the year.
Okay, so will you warehouse fireworks here?
No, it'll be strictly a retail.
Okay, bring them in, set them on tables, and
Correct.
And that will only be during the 2 weeks that you sell.
Correct. I'm not 100% sure when the selling dates are, but whatever the Soto regulations are.
I think it's July 1st through the 4th. I think we may have extended it to the last day of June. I couldn't swear to that. It's only about a week.
okay,
You
so
can sell.
to make it clear, you have to request a permit to sell fireworks.
Yeah, each year.
Correct.
Every year.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they're well aware of that process.
All right.
And I'm not sure how this would go. I really do more of the building stuff, and I don't do a whole lot with the fireworks. But I'm assuming, 2 weeks or whatever, 3 weeks, we'd come in, we'd take out all the interior stuff that was the sports facility, and then come set up all the fireworks, because it takes a good week or two to set up the shelving, set up the fireworks, unbox everything. So they could possibly be in there a week or two before we actually open. But once again, we couldn't sell until those, whatever dates.
And you actually pull the batting cages out during that time, is that correct?
I couldn't speak to how we would do that. I know right now, back in Pittsburgh, in the one in Topeka, everything comes out. The ones in Pittsburgh have retractable nets, so they go all the way to the ceiling. But that probably wouldn't work in this building, so they're probably just all going to come out.
That's my biggest concern, is the safety issue. Having fireworks and batting cages just doesn't seem like a good combination to me. And then, of course, the hotel right next door to it, you know, I've got a lot of concerns with the safety issue in that respect, all that fireworks in there. So, and my other question would be, I know we've already talked about it being okayed by codes, but who's going to monitor that to make sure that everything's out as far as the fireworks and there's no batting cage activity going on while the fireworks are in there?
That'd be our building officials.
So all that would
They
be
issue the
monitored?
permit, they'd have to go in and actually take a quick picture. I think we're clear about is batting recreational stuff ends, fireworks start. There's
No lap over, okay.
And I think to that point, by that time, the weather's really nice, and the business for that kind of just disintegrates. So it's really not feasible for us to try to keep it open and do it that way. The weather gets nice, everybody wants to go outside. They don't want to pay to hit when they could play to go outside.
Just a quick question. I know the building, the aesthetics are awesome. They really looks nice.
Thank you.
I'm really pleased with it. But, I mean, how's everybody going to know? It seems like if you had a batting cage name or something to associate it with that type of thing, your business would be tenfold.
You know, I'm not really sure on that aspect. As far as what they're going to do, I don't know if they would cover those signs up or, I think the way he has it shown is, channel letter, backlit channel letter, can letters. I don't know 100% how we're going to do that yet. If a lot of times we'll do just maybe a hardboard sign and then cover up that hardboard sign with a banner right over it. But I couldn't right now speak to how exactly we would do that.
So the banner would be up 11 months of the year.
It would, whatever we would do would, that's a good question.
Well, I guess then also the sign permits also issued by the official department. So while it's on the site plan, we know there's going to be a sign. Whether it says Jake's Fireworks or World Class Sports or whatever, we can kind of look through some of those issues at that point.
Well, if I were building a building, I would like to know that we're going to be hitting them up with saying you can't have a banner across there 11 months of the
Right,
year.
we
So
do
it
that.
gives
We
them an
do address that
opportunity
with
to.
our temporary sign.
Right.
Yeah, we do. We do have requirements. They can put a banner sign up, but it's only for a set amount of time, a certain number of times a year. There are limitations on
Right.
that.
And that could be one of the deciding factors. Well, we don't want to do that type of sign then if it can't be easily switched out. We might do a internally lit sign with a one of those flex faces on the building, so that flex face could just slide out. The new flex face could slide in, and it says World Class Sports.
Okay.
I'm not 100% sure. Like I said, this was kind of one of the first ones we've done, so we're just we don't have a working model yet.
Okay.
And of course, because of First Amendment requirements, we can't regulate the content of any sign other than vulgarity. We've
Right. I'm
discussed this.
just mentioning it that
It had been my thought too. You're driving down K10. It's April. You see fireworks. I'm getting off to buy some fireworks. And then there's batting cages, and then you go get a burger at McDonald's and get back on K10 and
Well,
I-
and I-
that'd be fine.
Yeah,
You know,
that'd be-
more traffic.
Well, I appreciate that too, because that was one thing that we never, it never really came up with. So, I think just hearing it, it would be the way to go with the internally lit, with a flex facade that could just be easily replaced.
Get a lot of traffic off of K10 that way.
Yeah.
In the future, do you have any plans of putting a pole sign up?
Not that I'm aware, no. No, pole signs are pretty expensive, and we usually don't do that.
So you're a construction person,
Yes.
more so. Okay, we'll have some special category of sprinkler system in the building. It has to.
So
But will it have more than normal? Or you know what I'm getting at?
So we'll follow NFPA 13, which is the code for sprinklers. We're an ordinary hazard group 2 for any retail facilities, which is what we would propose. And I believe that would be more stringent than we would need for the batting cages, and I think we technically wouldn't even need a sprinkler system for the batting cages. Because I believe the limit on a recreational area is 12,000 square feet.
Well,
So,
I know height is critical. The lower the steel on the structure is to the storage area, the more severe the exposure. When I used to work for Yellow Freight, we had 20,000 pounds of road flares that, and it basically melted, a 200-foot section of structural steel. Sure. When you were saying firecracker, that's why I asked about storage in there and sprinklers.
well,
We didn't have sprinklers.
and we can only store 12 feet high, 12 feet on the exterior walls, 6 feet on the interior walls. So our storage of our fireworks can't go over 12 feet. And I think we're 24 feet, plus the sprinkler system. And just to add a little bit to your comment, we feel that buildings are very safe. We haven't had any issues at any of our retail buildings or anything. We feel they're very safe. One reason, everything's contained. You don't have people driving by, flicking cigarettes or something out into a tent or something like that. There's a ton of signage as far as no smoking, no fireworks discharge. That'll all be posted on the outside of the building. And we feel that in this situation, we'll have a fire alarm for notification, smoke, heat detectors. So if a fire were to happen, of course, everybody gets outside with the annunciation and the alarms and everything. But if the sprinkler system does its job, it's going to put it out. So the fire department isn't having to come in and do anything. So we think that it's very safe in that regard. Whereas if something happens in a tent, there's nothing in a tent. Everything's just going to burn and burn and burn. So.
To that point, when they actually go to construct the building, they're going to have to submit plans for plan review. Everybody's going to have to look at it. So they're not going to let them build a building that's not safe for what the use is. So,
Correct.
That's
you know,
beyond our.
we're not inside the building, so I don't want to get caught up there. So, just they're not going to let them build a building that's not safe. So, keep that in mind.
Can you tell us these exterior materials? There's no brick; it's split face block.
Correct.
Okay, which has been used around town as kind of the second tier below the brick, but so that's what you're proposing. And is that all the way around? Is what I'm seeing.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Then above that is metal siding, corrugated metal siding.
Correct.
And the colors you're proposing, I thought I saw some dark color. I guess it doesn't matter.
They're going to be similar to the colors on screen. They're
Gray.
I think it's a burnished slate and a fox gray.
Okay. And what's the mesh? It's trying to read on here. Architectural screen panels with decorative graphic printed on surface. Can you give me an example of where something else is like that?
I haven't seen a whole lot in this area. If you'll allow me, my architect who proposed this was showing me a place in Kansas City that has it, and I'll pull it up so you guys can look at it real quick.
Seems like the
Or do you know, Justin, where he was talking about?
the soccer venue in Kansas City, Kansas has got some screening. Like, I'm not sure though.
Actually, the Sprint Center is kind of like that in places too. It's just got a metal mesh around the building in places.
I thought it was glass. Or you think it's mesh on the
So
Sprint
there is
Center?
some areas.
Part of it.
Part of it, yeah. I'm not saying it's wrong. I just want to know what it is. So,
Sure. And if my phone pulls up, I'll try to direct you that way.
We're going to the Sprint Center now. I don't know if it's going to work or not. Where are you talking about, Brad?
Yeah, it's right around there.
Over to the
sort of
left on
entry
the-
area. I recall. It's kind of just a mesh kind of stuff. Maybe it's built on the floor.
Sporting KC has it.
And if I'm not mistaken, when I was reading through this, it was actually a fabric type, and it had a 25-year warranty. It was actually a local company out of Kansas City.
and
Just
so it's
not
got a
doing anything right now.
Those are some pretty big looking panels, like 20-something feet tall, and they look to be 5 or 6 feet wide. That's
And that was a representation by him. The actual panels might vary.
might be
I believe he was saying that there's no vertical or
no horizontal.
no horizontal. It's all vertical.
Well, this is in our realm, is the visual, the materials, and I just don't know this product. And I don't want to use the excuse, well, the building code will cover it. I guess the building code will cover life safety and does it meet code and will it burn and that kind of stuff. So I don't know what to say. I don't know that it's a showstopper, but I sure don't know what it is,
To speak to that, so I've worked on some projects where we use it on canopies. It's just like a high strength fabric vinyl type material that they can screen print on. Basically, it's so you can see through the material. It's
Like
like
a
a
drum
backlight
head?
to it.
This
Yeah.
here?
So, but it's like a real high
Looks
strength
like it, don't it?
material, and I use it all the time. So, like down at Sprint Center, over the top of the open area or the whatever the Power and Light District right next to it. That whole dome area over the top has that same type of screen material that they use. So it's just it's kind of hard to see it probably, but it's just a fabric material. But it's a high
This here,
strength
huh?
that's made to be durable
That.
outside. That type of material, similar to it.
Kind of translucent.
And you know that because something he said, or you know that because
Well,
you've
just
seen
just
it.
based on what he just said, it's the fabric type
Yeah.
material. I just came off a project where we put like a solid non-translucent on the top, and the bottom was like a perforated, and there's lighting in between it so that it would let downlight on the sidewalks. But it's a nice heavy-duty product. They use it all over, so
And I finally found the information. It's called Flex Facade, and it's there's a company here in Kansas City that does it, and it's actually he gave me a demonstration of the Prairie Fire Museum. They use it on.
Yes, I know. Okay, it's not a fabric. It's a tubular.
oh, it is a metal mesh.
Metal
It's
mesh.
a tubular plastic.
Oh,
Well, that's what I think that Prairie Fire is. And if you go down Ward Parkway and you look at the backside of what's that high school there, Rockhurst, backside of their football stadium that's got those panels along. I mean, I think that's what it is.
Is this the place?
Yeah, that's
Yep,
it.
that's prairie fire, yep. But never bunch, never paid any attention to what they had. Probably that stuff right there.
Love that stuff.
That it?
It's very iridescent, that is, though, in real life.
Yeah, it is. It's like
Yeah.
it's pretty shocking.
Pretty.
But
That's a neat place.
the ones I've seen are tubular plastic. They're not just a single sheet, but there's all kinds of stuff out there. That's why.
If
That's
it's got a
kind of why I was
25
asking.
year- Yeah, if it's got a 25-year warranty with it, then I would think it must be pretty
Okay.
strong. Sorry. Same thing all do.
Okay, so you've got a parapet on 3.5 sides.
Correct.
The downspout, the gutter downspout is along the motel side, but you're wrapping part of that with a parapet.
Correct.
Is the gutter in front of that then? It must be.
No, actually, we're not wrapping that side with the parapet. It'll have that meshing on
Mesh,
part of the side,
okay.
which will be part of those gutters will be behind that mesh.
Okay.
Also, another thing about the rendering, I mean, there'll be landscaping on all sides. Front, but then glass. Something else I just want to point out when we're talking about cottage, the added, we asked them to add some of those. But those are nice details to include.
I'm glad you're putting those little windows in up there. They really add to, that gives you some indoor lighting and it's a nice visual effect. So the stuff must be, and they're behind your screen wall too. Yeah, I can see
Correct.
it.
Mhm.
Okay. What haven't we asked? We've talked safety, which is more related to the building permit, but it's, just so we have a feel, the sprinklers and we talked setbacks, we talked building materials, we talked visual to neighbors, we talked front yard, side yard, plans for the future. There must be something we're missing.
I think we pretty much covered it.
Pretty much, we beat it up pretty good, beat it to death. I like the plan. I like the fact that you don't have a lot of rooms in here. If you're going to have explosive materials, and a big open ceiling, that's a good, good shape. And so with 72 people, you have enough toilets, or 72 people. Excuse me. Do you know occupant load?
We haven't actually finished the architectural plans yet, but judging from other buildings that we've had that were a little bit smaller, I'm gonna guess it's probably
Yeah,
around
right.
150.
I know I shouldn't be looking at that, but it's hard not to, because it's right here in this set. Yeah. And we talked to signage. We'll have another set of eyes to look at it. We don't.
Yeah, so, what we do, if there is signage on a site plan, we ensure that it meets our regulations. So it's not too big, there aren't too many of them, they're in the right location. So we've done that on this, but they're not bound to that. They could come back with an
With a
alternate
different-
signage proposal, and we could administratively approve that, as long as it meets our rules. The only exception would be a pole sign that is only allowed by a special use permit that would have to come back here.
Always like to do this, and I'll start myself on this. Just my 10-word conceptualization is, I think it would fit acceptably at this location. Why don't we go left and right beyond me, and if you don't want to say anything, don't.
I think it would be a real asset to the community. I think it's a nice-looking building. The aesthetics are nice. It's going to offer the athletic area for our kids that we need, so I don't see a problem with it.
What do you think, Fisher?
I don't see a problem with it. I think it looks nice. It meets
think
all the requirements, so.
Yeah.
I think it'll look better than, other possibilities. If we had a huge building the size of Engineered Air or something there, it would be blocking a whole lot more area than what we're talking about
We
here.
could do much worse.
Yes, we could do much, much worse.
No, I'm for it. I think it's a good thing. How many times we've come to these meetings of, we need something in that corridor right there. So now we have it.
I think it's good also. I mean, long term, it provides opportunities. If things don't work out here, then it's a good building for future use. It's good use of the land and bring more people to help develop there. So I think it's good.
You should feel good.
Well, and just to note on that, I know my associate who's not here tonight, but he deals with the sports part of it, and he is super excited because there's people all over that want to come here from. We got people in Topeka that are driving from wherever over to Topeka, and this is just so much closer. So I think it'll bring a lot of people who wouldn't necessarily stop in DeSoto to DeSoto, plus along with being able to open it up to the community and let the community come in and use it as well. So
Thank you. Anybody in the audience wish to add anything at this point in time before we make a motion and take a vote? If not, can I have a motion and a second for approval, not recommendation, but for approval of this site plan? And like Mr. Gare was saying earlier, the buck ends with us. So that's why we want to be thorough, and I can't think of anything we've missed. Could be, but don't think too much. So can I have a motion and a second?
I'll make a motion that we approve the site plan as presented for Jake's Fireworks.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes, Lane,
Yes.
Hemphill,
Yes.
Garrett,
Yes.
Manson,
Yes.
Fisher,
Yes.
Schultz.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Woohoo. Okay, well, good luck. Well, I feel a lot better about it now than I did like 3 hours ago. I was, when I saw the Jake's Fireworks, this is not the Ozarks. I'm just.
Went quicker
Roger,
than
you gotta
Dollar
look at the-
General.
What's that?
It went quicker than Dollar General.
Well, it did.
Yeah.
It did, yeah. Yeah, that's right, Dollar
You
General.
gotta look at the
was-
plan on the inside. It said batting cages.
Yeah.
Did you see that or not?
What's that now?
It said batting cages on the inside.
Oh,
of the
yeah,
rental
yeah, I
plan.
like that. I mean, see you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I mean, that's why I just figured we're off track here. Let's stay on track, and when the meeting's over, I'll pass along some other information. Okay, we're not done yet. Don't pack your stuff. All right, item 7,
B.
where is it?
7B.
7B, text amendments allowing digital highway monument signs. And just for everybody else's, for the newer members, were you guys,
Oh,
not all of you were here when this came up before. You were.
so was
Okay.
I.
So some of you weren't here. There was a proposal for a large monument sign, or a large digital sign similar to what you see if you're going downtown and you're on I-35, and as you approach where Baby Doe's used to be, I don't know if anybody of you remember that. I mean, it's on the left-hand
place on the
side as
hill.
you're, that big information sign. Something like that was proposed for the city, proposed by a community member on this piece of ground, similar to where this building went. And it was rejected. I think city council at that point in time was, well, maybe I should have staff give us this background.
Well, yeah, Brad has volunteered me to give the background on that. My memory may be as fuzzy or fuzzier than yours on the issue, but essentially what happened, and I can't remember how many years it's been. It's been several years where this electronic message board sign was proposed, and at that time we were just coming off the heels of some signage revisions where we had allowed pole signs by a special use permit process. Prior to that, we had relaxed our sign regulations in other ways, just the number of signs and the type and size of signage that's allowed in the commercial districts, just to give more flexibility with commercial signage. So we had just been through kind of two successive processes where we relaxed sign regulations, and then we were asked to consider the electronic message board, kind of the highway billboard type signage. And frankly, I think historically there's been a bit of a stigma attached to those signs as being a bit gaudy or backward or flashy. And within the community and along the K-10 corridor, there's just been some aversion to the idea of a highway monument or highway message board sign like that. In addition to that, the one that was proposed was on a pole sign, essentially very high, pretty large sign. And so the discussion had been, we're kind of worn out with these sign regulation changes. And at the time, the applicant had actually suggested, Travis Hicks, who owns the property there, east of Super 8, owned the Jake's Fireworks property, until he sold it for that, had proposed it. And essentially, it was proposed by him. We have a process where anybody can request an amendment to the regulations. And so he did that under that process. We had the public hearing on it. Planning Commission voted to deny, and the council followed that recommendation. Since that time, a couple years has passed, and there was recently some discussion between a council member and Mr. Hicks about the sign and what about it at the time that was unpalatable to the community. Some of the discussion at the time was that the city would have an opportunity to have some advertising on that billboard sign at some sort of interval, some sort of rotation that might be like off hours or kind of a muted sort of presence on there. The other discussion was that with the rental rates on electronic message board sign like that, there was concern that local businesses might not have the opportunity, might not be able to afford advertising. So the sign would be advertising for businesses and services outside of the community. So that was kind of in the discussion. So since that time, there'd been some just off-topic discussion between a council member and Mr. Hicks about modifying that concept to be more palatable to the community, and it was brought up for just as a discussion item at the city council in August. They discussed the idea of, rather than having a pole type sign, have it be a monument type sign, so that the sign is not up in the air, but it's closer to the ground, and then have some architectural requirements around that sign so that it has some architectural interest. So basically make it look like an entry type monument sign rather than just a utilitarian pole type structure. And then the other part of that was an increased presence for city advertising on that monument sign. So that concept was discussed with the city council, and the council said that no one was really opposed to the idea of bringing that sort of a concept back up. So this current text amendment sprang out of that discussion. So staff engaged in a discussion with Mr. Hicks, and the mayor and the council member was involved with that meeting, and out of that meeting came the red line version of the text amendment that we'll be discussing tonight. Essentially, we tried to capture the idea that there will be city advertising rotation on the sign, and it'll be a monument type sign. and then it will only be allowed by a special use permit process. So we discussed this again at the council meeting last week, because separate and apart from just this text amendment discussion, there's also a concept that the city might want to partner with Mr. Hicks in constructing a welcome sign, a city entry welcome sign with the city logo that is attached to or immediately adjacent to or part of the monument sign structure that will be the electronic message board. There wasn't complete 100% buy-in on the council for that, I think for a couple reasons, because nobody knows what this thing's going to look like yet. Nobody knows how much it's going to cost yet. But the concept was still generally okay with the council. So the council decided to do last week was, of course, let this process of the text amendment just move forward. So the Planning Commission will discuss it here tonight. The plan would be to call a public hearing for the next meeting. And then if it goes forward, it does have to be approved by the city council ultimately. So let that process continue. The council's also agreed to engage a landscape architect, the one who had designed, we had a monument sign designed 6 or 8 years ago that we didn't build. Engage that architect with Mr. Hicks and come up with some sort of a concept rendering and get some idea about pricing, just in terms of the city's direct involvement with our welcome sign. That is still up in the air. We're not asking really the Planning Commission to, of course, if you have any feedback for that, as a citizen, feel free. But we really haven't engaged the commission formally on that side of things. But that's kind of the background as to why we're discussing this again in terms of the text amendment.
So council wants to pave the way with new restrictions to make it easier, make it
Possible.
fit better with our community.
Yeah,
to make this
so the question is,
sign
do we
fit
want these signs even a possibility? And it used to be no, and now it's yes, with these caveats that, you know, it, at least from the council standpoint. Now, that doesn't mean Planning Commission's going to agree. So, that we thought from a council and staff perspective that this red line, the idea that you have in front of you, is different enough from the one we just decided on a couple years ago to warrant another decision. Now, you know, from a public policy standpoint, from a city administrator standpoint, you don't just want to keep running up the same questions to successive councils or planning commissions till you get the right answer. So there's a line, you know, that we want to make sure if we, you know, that we don't cross there. I don't think we cross that with this. I think this is a different enough thought, a different enough concept to warrant.
Can I quote Marge Morris? Marge Morris, who ran the grocery store down here forever. Okay. Travis, you're going to be advertising for merchants that do not live in DeSoto on this sign in DeSoto. That'll be the day, you know, with her comment. I mean, you know, so we are answering, or this answers that.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe.
Well, how does it answer that? How does it
We
answer?
can't regulate the content.
So the city would have no regulations on what goes across there, even though it says City of DeSoto. We'd have no.
Okay, I want to be really clear about the distinction between what we're talking about with the Planning Commission and the background.
Okay.
So, and the background is a very valid discussion. You know, do we want the city's logo out there on this sign? That's the question you're asking. I think it's a very valid question because we're not going to be able to control what the content. And people driving down K10 are going to assume it's the city's sign and the city's controlling that content. And the city of DeSoto's advertising for Olathe Dodge. Okay, that's a discussion at the council level.
Okay.
Very valid discussion.
Okay.
Tonight, the discussion is, do we want to implement a mechanism that makes electronic message boards possible along K10?
Okay.
If so, now we very well could decide that we don't want the city's logo on it. It needs to stand on its own. And if these amendments are enacted, then Mr. Hicks or anybody else will be able to come to this board and apply for a permit to do what he's independent of the city.
Okay.
So that's kind of, I mean, that's a very sticky wicket. And some would say, oh, we think it's fabulous if the city of DeSoto would be associated with some really nice looking advertising, very forward thinking. We think it'd make a name for DeSoto in the region. We think the stigma about the electronic message board stuff is gone. And we're not all that concerned that we're going to be advertising strip clubs in Topeka in the future on this sign. So
And they have the right to do that.
as long as it's not vulgar, I mean, there's a vulgarity clause there in the First Amendment, but
We spent
Kind of what you were talking
we spent
about.
many hours on this thing.
yeah.
And one of the big things, I asked Hicks himself, I said, are you gonna be advertising your businesses in Lawrence? And he said, yes.
Well, that was what Marge was so.
That's right.
She's like, hey, you got merchants here, how you expect them to make it if you're with, you know, Rusty's IGA or whatever, and Lawrence is, you know, blah, 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 you know, all their
Anybody
great
could have gone to
prices.
him and said, hey, I wanna advertise on your sign.
Yeah.
If you had the money to pay it. And I think the cheapest thing was like $800 for a week.
Well, it was
It was-
so many seconds.
Yeah, there's so
Once
many
a day,
seconds
so
on
many
there.
seconds. It was expensive.
Yeah, it was very
there-
expensive.
I think it's
Is there a site location that is in mind for this?
So one quick thing, just looking through this, maybe I'm reading it incorrectly. It's basically laying the groundwork for one sign. It appears, because it says
4,000
under
foot,
restrictions,
yeah.
yeah, you can't be within 4,000 feet. So essentially, you're laying the groundwork for possibly one sign
That's
along
exactly
K10.
right.
Yeah.
And it also says in here, total height of the sign and structure may not exceed 35 feet from the ground.
That's
Right?
getting
So
up there.
35 feet, we just talked about the top of the hotel is 35 feet or whatever you said.
If I
it was.
remember right,
So-
the size of this sign was gonna be 40 feet by 14 feet high.
It was gonna be massive. It was gonna be the size of that one down.
40 feet.
40
Kansas City,
feet this
Kansas.
way, 14 feet high.
So
It's
basically,
672 square
the
feet.
size of a tractor
Monster.
trailer.
Yeah.
Or
The
side.
size of
Side.
the tractor trailer
Yeah.
side.
Yeah.
yeah.
Now, what would stop, since it's not a pole sign, what would stop somebody from finding a piece of ground and making a big mound 30 feet tall and putting that sign on top of the mound?
Well, so that's one of the things. The version of the text we have here, it needs some cleaning up as to define exactly where are we measuring from existing ground, previous existing ground. That was actually one of the comments that Mr. Hicks's team came back with and said, 35 feet's okay, but where are we measuring that from? I've pulled up just an example of what was shown to the council last week as maybe the type of sign that our regulations are kind of trying to get at. That it's landscaped, it's got rocks, some architectural interest. It is mounded up, you know, above the natural grade anyway. I don't know how tall. This probably isn't 35 feet. I mean, that might be 25 feet. But that's the concept.
But that's not a digital sign.
That's an electronic
Oh,
message.
that is an
That we're
electronic.
looking
Yeah.
at,
Yeah. So that's sort of the thought behind the language here. But yeah, in terms of the buffer, 4,000 feet on one side of the highway. So you could have one somewhere around the Super 8. You might be able to have one up at the Kill Creek interchange. And then similar
This
thing on the
they have
south
to be
side.
rezoned. I mean, this is only for M1
You'd
zoning.
be just short of a mile in either direction.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It basically gets you out of the city limits on K10,
On both
almost,
sides, yeah.
going both ways.
And nobody else can put one in.
Right. So we're laying
Yeah.
the groundwork for one person
That's
to put
right.
a sign
I think it says on the same side of the highway.
on
So-
the same side. So they
you
could
could have
potentially
another
pick
one
up
on the
a
other-
piece of property on the other side
on the
and put
other
another
side.
sign.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think if Mr. Hicks was here, he would say that requirement kind of cuts both ways.
Protects.
Well,
Yeah,
somebody
it kind of
could-
protects the
yeah.
proliferation, but it's also kind of self-serving because
Right.
A little bit of a monopoly.
yeah.
Well, how about we just go ahead and just start on page 1 with the red text and we start throwing darts at it, and the council has thrown this at us like, hey, here, you guys need to revisit this. And I'm sure
I'm not-
I think there's a need for, there could be a use.
Well, you know
for
what
a sign
bothers
like
me?
this.
If we go ahead and do this, and this thing passes and we put our blessing on it,
Yeah.
and then after it's up and residents just get irate, it'll always come back to the planning. Well, you guys okayed it.
Explain to me the special use permit process. I'm not familiar
Yeah.
with that. So that has to go submit in and get reviewed by
Planning
us,
commission.
and does
and the
council review
council.
that also? So it
Yeah.
has to come to us again. So
Right.
basically, all we're saying is, yeah, it's okay for you to submit something, but we have to look at it, review it, decide whether or not we like it, make our motion one way or the other, and then it goes to the council if we
That's
approve, I
right.
guess, right? So,
And
This
it's
is
a
just
public
opening
hearing
the door
item.
for a sign.
Yeah.
right. So yeah, so that would allow everybody, residents, to come in and comment
Right.
also, right?
Right.
So we're not saying it's okay to put the sign up. We're just saying it's okay for you to try to ask for a sign.
But you can only make it this high, you can only make it this wide. I mean,
Correct.
those are the darts we can throw at it right
Right,
now.
right.
We can choke it down or make it bigger or,
I like the idea of having a way to advertise Wine Fest, DeSoto Days, other things like that.
We'd be the only one from Renner to Lawrence with a sign like that here on K-10.
Well, that's all right.
My thoughts was if, since it doesn't say when it would be shared with the city, if it's 3 o'clock in the morning when the information for the
Wouldn't
city
matter,
comes
would
up,
it?
what good's that gonna do?
See, we don't
Yeah.
have any control over that.
Right.
yeah, I've got it. My opinion is that is the duty of an elected official
Negotiate
to
the hours.
determine. I mean, you're talking a business, a business advertising on this sign or not advertising. I'd like to look at it myself as we got a sign. Let's just make it. Let's dumb it down a little bit or make it bigger or whatever. Let's adjust it to where we think it could work in the community. Just the visual. As far as my opinion is, as far as whether DeSoto does something like this or not, that's almost a city council program, and they've sent this to us. And would I be putting you on the spot if I ask for some of your input from a person we discussed at the beginning of this?
He explained to me that he had met with Travis again,
Yeah.
and we all know that, and that the need is there because we lack ways for people to know what's going on in a community. So they felt like it would be a really good community advocate of different events that's going on, whether it be Wine Fest or the Sunflower Art Fest or whatever's going on in town. So he just felt like it would be good in that respect, and it would also tie in with Travis and other businesses in the community. They could bill the time out like we've talked before about and make it more affordable for people, because that was a topic of discussion as well, so that other people could afford it and not just the big companies, but there again, it's the hours and when it would be put on. My concern was when I first saw this, I didn't realize those big signs is what he was flipping it over, and that's going to change the whole thing. I was thinking of Travis's little sign that has the little words on there, and I thought, that's not going to work. You can't read that going down the highway.
No, that's
But
why it's
those
the
great
size
big
of-
things.
That's why it's the size of a tractor trailer.
Well, I didn't
Well,
know
I'm
that.
thinking of reference to that. They have a large sign up there now, anyways, right? I don't know, Joe Bazone has a sign or something, a billboard, right?
Okay, 10 place.
Yeah, whatever. That's a relatively large sign. I mean, it's not
Yeah.
too much smaller probably than what they're proposing. They have a tractor trailer sitting out there in the field right now for whatever's going on in the field. But I mean,
It kind of gets lost. You're
Sitting
saying
here
the big
thinking
size
about
gets
it,
lost.
looking on paper, yeah, that sounds huge. Whatever 600, he says 14 by whatever
40?
the size was. But that's really in reference from the highway to there. It's not
gonna
that
look
large.
that big.
The only thing that's
No.
somewhat concerning is the max height of 35 feet. They're going to hit
Yeah,
the top of
that's getting
35
up there.
feet. So he's concerned about our 25-foot building blocking visible signs. They're going to put it up as high as they possibly
You're
can.
going to block a lot.
Yeah,
Right.
you've got-
So that's going to be the only thing that would be consideration. But that's also has to be reviewed when they submit. So
You've got Lenexa on 10 Highway, you've got Olathe, Eudora, and Lawrence. There's got to be a reason the rest of those communities haven't allowed those either.
right.
I don't know, but
Well,
that doesn't mean we
yours
can't be
got
on the
one.
cutting edge.
Well, that's
Eudора's
true.
got a small sign in front of the Lawrence Memorial Hospital thing.
Oh,
It's
that's
about 12 feet wide. I drove up to it and looked at it, 12 feet wide and about 6 feet tall. What's so awkward is it's so small.
Then you're going 80 past it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not driving 80, but
70, whatever. Nobody goes under 80.
70,
I know.
80.
Okay,
You're driving along there at a pretty good clip, and it's
That's
kind of.
my-
I mean, you can see it, but boy,
That was my
it's
concern too.
if it was bigger, it'd be easier to read. Of course, then it'd make more of a visual statement.
Another thing that was discussed back then was the distraction factor.
For people
That's right.
driving.
Yeah.
That thing's gonna put out some light at nighttime. I know it says.
Well, they're regulated by a certain,
Hours of
Lumens.
operation.
Yeah,
And
KDOT
lumens
would
and all
have-
that stuff also, it says.
right,
how bright it
KDOT
can be.
regulates that.
KDOT would have to approve this too, and they have their own standards, which I believe our standards mimic the KDOT's.
And who put these together? These
I did.
you did. Okay,
Yeah.
so
Well,
you're
Patrick
telling
and
us that
myself.
they met whatever is in here is adequate or in alignment with KDOT.
Yeah, to my knowledge, now there may, because we looked at it really closely the last time,
Yeah.
like 3-4 years ago,
Yes.
and so they were in concert 3 or 4 years ago, unless KDOT's changed something.
But it also says that they have to submit for KDOT approval anyway.
Yeah, they would.
so
Yeah, that's the state
Wouldn't get
requirement.
past theirs, so.
Yeah.
Let's go through this and figure
Well,
out.
I
what you
suggest
said.
we just start at the top and go through the red and throw darts at it and let the council be the ones to determine if there's actual a need and if it's does this brand DeSoto as what? As an active, vibrant community moving into the future, or is it brand us as we're selling out? Or I'm
I'd
just
like to
throwing
say that
stuff
we're
out
on the
there.
cutting edge. I think we should,
Okay.
yeah, I think that there isn't anything wrong with looking at new ways to advertise and get the word out,
I mean, I don't have any problem with the advertising.
Yeah.
It's how we're gonna be treated.
By the
They're asking
owner
the
of
city to
the-
pay part of this, aren't they?
No,
The city's not gonna have any
the
money
city.
invested.
We would pay our part of whatever city monument logo sign component to this would be. We would have to pay for that,
Okay.
but we could choose not to do that. That's the discussion at the council.
And then the other thing, we'd pay that part of it, but we still wouldn't have any say-so over what goes on the sign.
The only other thing that we have in these regulations is highlighted about. I think it's the second thing in yellow.
Sign must be make available free of charge to advertising time at regular rotation intervals for use by city, school district, chamber of commerce, and other civic organizations. I think that's critical that that's in
Yeah.
there. But,
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
it doesn't specify how much time, but I mean,
And
time
what
available.
time?
Correct.
That's right.
Would there be any way we could ask an agreement to be signed with Mr. Hicks about 50% of the advertising be from DeSoto merchants? I mean, I know we can't regulate what's on there, but is there any way we could get him to sign an agreement saying, if we put this thing up?
50%'s a lot.
Well, yeah.
It is.
Yeah, right now it's pretty nebulous. I mean, the way and I don't know in the context
just-
of a text amendment how specific we
Thinking
can
out
really
loud.
get about
Yeah.
that.
That's part, I mean, my opinion is that's part of the special use permit. That's part of
That review
the
process.
politics. I mean, the elected officials, the message they're getting from the community that.
Ideally, I thought it'd be 100%, but.
I mean, I'd like to think we can tell them the visual, the height, not the block, neighbors, blah, 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 that we should just understand that we're not gonna have regs in here to determine what percentage of use is by locals, that we're gonna
just
have regs
voting on the
for
sign at
the
this
size of the text, the physical, the visual, physical sign.
I would say Rob Daniels is watching our live feed. He
Yeah.
might be the only one, but he just sent me a text
Hi, Rob.
message that the current discussion with Mr. Hicks is a 1 in 8 rotations would be the city of DeSoto's free of charge. So an eighth of the time it would be the city of DeSoto. You're talking about something different. You're talking about local businesses.
Yeah, if you're
So-
selling business time.
I just wanted to pass that along.
Okay.
That's a 24/7 requirement.
Seems pretty generous.
Yeah.
Hi, Rob. I'm glad you're watching. I wish you were here.
Well, he thought about calling in, so if that phone rings, I'll get up and we can pipe him through. But we'll leave that decision for him.
Okay. Well, let's go to page 1.
Okay.
Somebody walk us through this, Chief.
Me, Chief? Okay, so
I'm looking at you,
this
Mike.
would be molded into our electronic variable message board signage. We did this about 10 years ago when those signs became cheap enough for people to buy and actually use. That's when we looked at the brightness and the changing of the graphics and a lot of those requirements. So we have a definition for those electronic variable message board signs, which the billboard sign will be an EVMB sign. But we're calling these digital highway monument sign, DHM. So that's just a type of an EVMB. So not to get too military with the acronyms, but that's kind of what we're looking at. We're also defining these as you can only have them in this K10 overlay district, which basically is just along K10, a quarter mile in each direction, for a total width of a half a mile. So really just focused on highway advertising. We're saying specifically that they have to be a monument type structure. So the monument sign structure is defined in our sign regulations as basically the one along the ground that's not sticking up in the air. So I mean, we can look at that definition too. We're restricting them to property zoned light or heavy industrial or the commercial business districts and office business districts. So basically, you can't have them in a residential district. They can be placed on the lot that doesn't contain a principal use. We put this in there because we used to prohibit a type called billboard signage, and a billboard sign was defined in our regulations as a sign that's just out there on a vacant piece of property that advertises something else that's somewhere else. We used to have that restriction in there. First Amendment says you can't tell somebody what they can advertise. You can't regulate that content. So we could no longer really regulate that. But we're saying now specifically that you can place this on a vacant lot, essentially.
Excuse me, Mike, so would that be like at the end of Kill Creek? That lot down there, that's the vacant lot.
Well, any vacant lot.
not zoned.
Really. That one's
But it wouldn't
might
be
not
zoned right.
zoned. Yeah, that one might not be zoned right.
It'd have to be rezoned, of course. But
Yeah, it could be rezoned. Yeah. The second section gets into the type and design restrictions. We talk about they've got to be monument structures, like I talked about. The sport has to be hidden, landscape, and incorporated into the design. A lot of this in Section 2C, most of this comes straight out of our architectural design standards for commercial buildings, which are kind of by their nature more subjective, and which is why we need the Planning Commission to have those long discussions about what this building looks like, because we can't put a pencil to it and we can't tell you whether Jake's Fireworks Building met these requirements or not. That's a subjective value judgment that you guys have to make. These would be the same way. And this is to kind of get around this thing where you can have a set of architectural standards 4 inches thick and follow every single one and come up with the ugliest building you've ever seen. You know it when you see it, and that's what we kind of rely on you guys. So a lot of the stuff in Section 2C is just mimicked straight out of that architectural
number
standard.
I don't like the way that reads. An alternate to a support structure, has to be landscaped as. These things, I envision them as sitting on a base, like concrete base or something.
Uh-huh.
And I think concrete base ought to be allowed in here, but this talks about the structure must be hidden.
Let me show you where that came from.
Yeah.
And it came from when we had our meeting with when the mayor, Councilman Daniels, and staff had the meeting with Mr. Hicks, he provided some renderings of what a combined sign might look like. Now, once you see these, forget them, okay? Because this isn't what we're proposing. But at that meeting, he threw these out, and these are fine. You know, this is a decent example. Looks nice. You know, got the city logo, rock. One of them's even a fountain. But you can still see these.
There's air below the sign.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to get at. That we don't want to see that support struck. That's kind of ugly. That's where that came from. Now, whether it's brilliantly crafted or not, I think we could debate that. That was the intent behind it.
I mean, a monument sign to me is
Does away with that anyway.
you've got this is your monument and your sign sitting up there, not and your sign sitting up there with a couple rods holding it.
No,
up.
right.
He's just
Right.
covering all of our bases, though.
I think so. I mean, you could probably just take it out, and the definition of a monument sign precludes this. It would preclude that anyway.
I'd rather leave it in. Just safe.
But regardless, it could stay.
I think we've all talked about this a while. We're probably going to hammer the vertical height a little bit. So he's probably not going to have. There probably won't be any air below this. At least my take on how this thing ought to go forward is no air below the sign.
Yeah.
Okay, so must be monument type structures as defined in Article 7. Do you have Article 7? Or is it worth our time to look that up, or are you satisfied with this?
I'm satisfied. Your time is your time. I can pull them up.
But that could be beat up in the review process, right? Whether or not it hits it or not. I don't. That's where.
Yeah. There's a pretty specific definition of a monument sign. Let me.
We have
You should take it.
we have drawings of monument signs, and I don't remember them sitting on poles.
No. I don't know why it's taking so long. It's really grinding.
Okay, well, that's item 2. Support structure must be hidden. I'll agree. Yeah, that's landscaping incorporated into the design.
Here's the monument sign.
Okay.
Any sign whose base is greater in width than the face of the sign and whose height is no greater than 6 feet.
I mean, I like that visual that you're looking at right there.
I mean, that's the visual. I guess the height, would be precluded by this 35 feet we're about to talk about.
Yeah.
So that's the monument type sign that we're talking about, I believe.
So the support structure is that bottom portion, and it is not a couple steel poles that push it up in the air 12
Correct.
feet.
Yeah. And so now we're to the total
number
height.
3I, the one that everybody picked up on.
Yeah,
35
and I
feet.
would tell you, in the back and forth with Mr. Hicks,
Yeah.
the 35 feet was a specific number that they thought could work for them. They gave some feedback that they do want to define where that's from. Is it native ground or is it mounded ground? Or we need to have that discussion. 35 feet, you're right, it's up there. They indicated that they're looking at sightline visibility coming over a hill on K10, and they've indicated that that might be kind of what they need. So Mr. Hicks will be here at the public hearing when we talk about this again, and so maybe he could shed a little bit more light on it.
Well, if it's down in the creek, if it's down right by the creek, in the floodway, because that's cheap land, then you need it 35 feet. But if it's up on top of the hill, right by the Super 8,
maybe we
Block
could add.
everybody's view
Well,
of the
I mean-
businesses.
Maybe we could add something to this about the requirement for a line of sight analysis or something of that nature, where we'll have the information rather than trying to figure it out on ourselves on the Jake's Fireworks building. That we'll have that information submitted so that we can see a little better, more clearly during the special use permit.
yeah, man, that's tricky. That's I guess it does say shall not exceed 35 feet. doesn't mean it has to be 35 feet. Well, that just, that number
35
is
feet from the
spooky.
surrounding grade,
May not exceed.
And it depends on
but how far out?
relationship of the interstate to the surrounding ground, like, you know, that housing deal where there's that sign right past Daryl's barn as you're heading towards Lawrence up on the right. There's that real high piece of ground up there that if it's up there, it doesn't need to be 35. You know what I mean? If it were on top of a hill, it doesn't need to be 35 feet. If it's down the valley, yeah, maybe it does. So maybe we just, I don't know, maybe we just bite the bullet and leave it like it is. Let's,
No, I think that
I mean,
it's got to go through the review process, right? So the only thing would be the caveat of adding the review of a line of sight or something to not hinder surrounding businesses or something like that. But that just gets you an avenue to have discussion about
Yeah.
it, whether or not it blocks a view or not. I mean, and sitting here thinking about 35 feet and the relationship of being on the highway trying to see a sign, we can't say that it can only be like 15 feet because you're looking down in a hole and you're driving by, you're not going to see it. So, I mean, the argument of it's got to be 35 feet, that's just trying to get them probably to where it can be visible from both lanes of traffic in both directions. Probably, guessing. I don't know.
how can it be a monument when it's 35
Yeah.
feet? Is the other kind of like,
Right.
you know what I mean?
Well, it's like they made a monument, they built the landscape base around the side and built it up. Now, at what point do you, what's
Yeah.
classified as the surrounding ground? The bottom of the
Yeah.
landscape area or the top of the landscape area to the top of the sign? So,
Yeah, there's work to be done on
Yeah.
this.
Right.
There's work to be done on this language.
That'll definitely have to be determined because 90% of the people will have no issue with it, but there's going to be 10% of the people that want to do that. They're going to take that to the extreme and mound something up and say, well, you know, the ground this far away.
Yeah, they're
that's
going to build the
surrounded.
elevation up to the highway level and then
Yeah.
try and build the 35.
Somebody's
You know,
always going to
something
try and
like
take
that.
advantage
So,
of it.
Yeah,
Not that
that's
this,
true.
Mr. Hicks would, but there are people out there that will take
Well,
advantage
so
of any
yeah,
regulation.
we probably as staff need to work with Mr. Hicks and maybe the council to determine the best language here. One thing they're not going to be able to do is go into KDOT right away and build that up. So maybe we could base it on the elevation of the KDOT right away. We know no one's going to be able to come in and change that grade for their own
their
purposes.
sign is beyond the KDOT right away.
Yeah,
Anyway,
right.
I mean,
course they
you
wouldn't,
can't change
yeah.
grade in there. Boy, this is almost one that we ought to put a big circle around and say to be determined because man, I hate to. I mean,
No, this is exactly why we bring this up before the public
because
hearing.
there's so many variables. If you put it in a hole, you can't mount it up. I mean, to mount up that, I mean, oh,
You know, we went through the same scenario the last time, and
Yeah,
we
we-
never come up with a
we could never
solution to it.
You almost need a proposal sitting in front of you, and then you throw darts at it.
Well, so, maybe you establish an absolute maximum, but there's some language in here that, in no way is anybody, is this a right? It's at the discretion of the planning commission and council. Just some language in there that an applicant can't come in and say, I'm meeting this regulation, my sign's only 34.9 feet. Maybe there's
We're
some
only talking
language.
about one sign.
Well, I think we could probably be talking about 4, honestly, if they're both sides of the highway. Well, I mean, with the 4,000 feet buffer.
that and your, the zoning will change that, right?
That's right.
So based on the zoning, you're basically limited to a certain little area right there, right? M1, M2, C1,
Yeah.
C2. So that's not
So
going to be passed.
I can see a time in the future when somebody wants to do one of these at the Kill Creek interchange.
Yeah.
And I think that would be 4,000 feet away from the Super 8
Yeah.
area. So there could be 2 on the north side of K10, 2 on the south, I think.
Well, 35 feet and a monument do not compute. Those two statements don't compute, in my opinion.
It'd just be an extremely large monument.
Well, I mean,
You scale a
Well,
monument.
that would be based on what it said, whatever your base of
you
the
try and build a
monument was in
pyramid, it's
relationship
like
to height.
going over to Egypt, bringing one of the pyramids over here, and
So maybe we need to change the word monument.
well, That's what I'm fretting.
So based on that, his sign would have to have a base that's larger than 35 feet, right?
No, it's just
Base must be greater in width.
greater than the
base.
width of the sign face. So if the sign face width is 48 feet,
Right.
then the base has to be 49 feet.
Right.
Yeah. Forget the 6 feet. This says 6 feet. But
So if his sign is 10 foot tall, 35 feet above surrounding ground, his monument will be
The base would have to be
35 minus
36 feet.
25 feet. Like say, we'll bring a pyramid over here from Egypt, and that's
yeah,
their shape.
I
Yeah.
think we need to revisit them. wording on
That
it.
spook that those two requirements just don't compute in the same for the same sign.
What do you think, Tim?
I don't know, Bob. I'd like to see what the sign's going to look like before we approve
Nobody
it.
can tell us.
I know, nobody can tell us. So it's kind of like, how do you visualize something that you don't even know what it's going to look
Right.
like? Yeah. 35 foot tall, it could be just a square piece of concrete going up with just,
Yeah,
decorative
that's right,
block,
that's right.
35 feet from the ground up. And
A huge pylon.
yes, and then just have something at the top. I mean, so.
Is
That's
there
the only-
another
that's the only
word that
thing
we
that
could
scares
use
me.
to describe it rather than saying monument-type structure? Is there another verbiage that we could use? Or
we
another
could come up with
descriptor?
a new definition. Oh, I mean, the monument definition isn't terribly complicated. We could come up with a definition of a highway monument sign that
Yeah.
has something to this nature.
I think that's what we need to do. Because like you
Yeah.
said, it's going to look really odd.
Well, can staff go to Google, type in electronic signs, hit images, and start panning down through and bring to the next? Is this thing on
Well,
a
I mean, that's
severe
kind of
time
what
schedule?
that's kind of what this is.
That's
Bob,
what that is. That one right there.
That's kind of what this is.
What's the square footage of the sign?
The proposal is 672, so that'd be
So
14
now how do you
feet.
calculate that from the corner to corner of the?
That's just length times width. Oh no, that would just be the message
Just the
portion.
screen
That's the screen, so that
The
doesn't.
screen.
Okay.
So if
Yeah,
we
so
wanna-
maybe we
So
need.
you're not defining, from corner to corner, 672
So
square
if he wanted
feet.
to
You're
put 10 foot on the outside all the way around it, he could do that, and it would be.
But it can't
Right.
go over 35 feet, so he
Right.
limits his height on that. So
Yeah.
that's the only
Okay.
catch.
So in here, I mean, the structure could. There's no limit
as
to the
wide as
size
it-
of the structure,
Right.
other than just got to pass a special use permit process.
Yeah.
Now,
So-
how often on a special use permit
It
do they have
is,
to come
yes.
in front of the council?
So special use permits can have a sunset. We can when they come here.
Yeah.
So they ask for the special use permit. We can say this is a 10-year use permit.
Okay.
And you got to come back in 10 years. That is a little bit of a catch on the content. If they go wacky with the content, I mean, not that we could regulate that, but they would have to come back here and renew that use permit. So there could be a sunset on them.
Well, I know anybody can come through and build these signs once we get this set and we approve it. But Travis has always indicated that he's a real community player. I don't think he's going to do anything that's going to be detrimental to us. But like I said, it's not just Travis we're talking about here. Anybody
once
else
we
can
open
come
this
in.
up.
Right, but I know if Travis is involved in it, he's going to make sure that it
No, I agree.
is a real
Oh,
community.
and I agree too. I mean, I don't think he's going to want to lose business
No,
in DeSoto.
But
he takes.
he's also a businessman, and if somebody wants to buy the sign from him and offers him enough money, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just think long term. I know
Well,
I don't know
20
him.
years from now, he's going to
Yeah,
retire
I don't know him
somewhere.
at all. I'm sure he's a nice guy, but
Yeah.
he's also a businessman.
Yeah.
Somebody gets
He
enough
could
money to
unload
put
the
it on.
property, and somebody else has got it. Now you don't have
Right.
control over what's going on. So
That's right.
In the back of my mind, I keep thinking of all the signs going to Branson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know there's no way that would ever happen.
But we
Well, I
have a
think all
limit
we
to
need to
how
do-
many we
There's
can
this whole
have.
thing in the back
our
of
goal
my
should
head.
be to establish something where, when it does come on a special use permit, that there's opportunity for discussion.
Yeah.
You don't want to create something where it's
Too open-ended.
too open, right? Where it comes in, it goes right through. You can't argue any points, but you also don't want to restrict it to where there's no way ever possible that they could do it. But we just need to have an opportunity for discussion. But I don't know how you.
Well, that's kind of the line we tried to draw here. With
It's
what
close.
was
I mean, I don't think that you know, like everybody said, we want to see what the sign is, right? They may bring a sign in and go, wow, that's cool. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
sure, go for it. But, you know, maybe we're overthinking it, but
Well, no, we're absolutely not overthinking it, because what we're not thinking of, that's the problem, you know what I mean?
Right.
but
It's kind of like the proposal earlier from Jake's, if they had just came in and had a square building drawn with nothing on the outside. Well, this is what we're going to do, but we might do this and we might do that, but we need your approval before we do it. Well, you can't approve it till you see it.
You just gotta cover all the loopholes.
Yeah.
Well, the first problem I see is we're heading down through there, we're doing pretty good till we got to the 35 feet. I mean, we read through the monument part, and my take on it is monument and 35 feet do not belong in the same sentence. You know, the same sign regs. I would like to sense, we're not on a time limit to get this thing done this month. I would like to send those two particular items back to discussion between Mike and whoever on the council that, I mean, because you really can't have both. I mean, there's a rare occasion you could, but
You're talking about the monument structure as a definition, and then also the size. Is
the
that the two
35
items?
feet, yeah. They don't compute. And what I heard was Travis has to have 35 feet visual. I'm not sure 35 feet from surrounding ground, but how that relates to the pavement, you know, of the interstate. I just don't feel comfortable throwing darts at those two statements and saying, well, it's going to be this, because whatever we say is wrong. Well, I think we should find out, what does the 35 feet have to happen, and if it does, and if the council wants these signs, then we're probably going to have to drop the monument part, or change the definition to allow air under the sign. You know what I mean?
I think a change of definition is going to help us a lot, and it's also going to help somebody that's coming in and looking at this ordinance, whether or not they wanted to put in a sign or something. You know, it's a little bit more clear.
Yeah.
You're probably looking at $500,000 or more for one of these signs.
Well, I mean, here's for example, you have a 6 foot high berm full of bushes and landscape, and you got a couple masonry pylons coming up, and you have air under the sign, and the total thing's 35 feet, but it does have a base. But that doesn't fit our definition of monument. But it's kind of a halfway, you know what I mean, between monument and pole sign. But if we got to have 35 feet, I don't know how else they can build it.
Or to see what else is on there.
So, and I don't feel comfortable making that
clarification of your question.
recommendation right now, but if I had to make one right now, that's what it would be.
Yeah.
That you still need a base, and that's the landscape, the berm, and something visual, but that you can have poles going up, poles plural, not just one, like a pole, you know, that you can have 2 pylons supporting it. Something along those lines.
So elevated
work.
up from the base is what you're saying?
Elevated from the base.
Not to exceed 35 feet high.
On this is the base, that's the sign, and there's a couple poles like that. How else you gonna get it 35 feet in the air, you know what I mean? But here I am, I'm trying to design it.
Yeah.
Well, we just contradicted our initial
Yeah.
line that says you can't show your support structure
Yeah.
structure by
Yeah.
that. So I don't know.
Well, like I say, they don't belong in the same sentence, monument and
Right.
35.
Yeah, we need to.
I think so. Maybe the word's not a good word, but definitely a new description, a new definition of what these signs are. The general bulk, like structure of these signs. We need something more than just this.
More than just a monument sign.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, so that would cover items 2C, I, and double I, and triple I. Those 3 items describe definitions, and then describe height, and those will be reworded by staff.
Yeah, and I think probably 4 too. Well, maybe not.
Base of sign must be landscape, fence, screened, or otherwise. Yeah, probably. I mean,
That's
We
probably
def-
okay.
Or,
that probably
What's
has
that
to
got cut
happen
off?
yeah,
regardless.
or otherwise,
Yeah.
kind of got cut off. Oh, concealed, the bottom word isn't on there. Otherwise concealed, that's what is missing off here.
Number 5, minimum building materials standards.
Did we put anything in there under wind load and stuff like that?
Well, that'd be a
that
building,
goes without saying, I think.
building code stuff.
Do we have something?
Well, they'll have to get a building permit for whatever.
I mean,
This
do
would
we
be
actually
defined
have
in the
something in our
structure.
codes that has to do with wind?
Thing, it'll have to withstand so many mile-an-hour winds.
Yeah.
That's pretty, building code 101.
Yeah.
right here.
I mean, yeah, just like sign bases are notoriously huge. I mean, you see a lot of signs that are like, like this, where they got big ass guy wires coming out of them. But no, that's when we used to do them at Yellow Freight, man. Those sucker for a 30-foot high pole, 5 by 10. The base was usually about 6 foot round, about 8 foot deep. Monster, big, and a huge steel column coming out of that. So that was the building code back then that we were meeting. So your point is, it's got to be designed to carry wind loads.
Right.
And I don't think that belongs in our, I mean, we could add it, but I don't.
Well, I didn't know what we had in for
Well,
that. I don't.
we're covered, aren't we, staff?
Yeah.
All right, we're covered. Yeah, okay. Okay. Building material standards. Design structure in areas not covered by the EVMB shall consist of one or more of the materials below: masonry. I hope we got something in there about lightweight screening. Let's see, stucco.
These are.
I think that's a little weak, the materials allowed. Because the sign's going to be a lightweight steel. I mean, you know what I'm saying?
But it's also got to get engineered for construction.
It's got to get
right?
engineered,
Yeah.
but like,
I wasn't
Basically, all
looking
you
to
did was-
reinvent the wheel on this. This is
Yeah.
straight out of our
That's your
all the other
architectural requirements, right?
architectural stuff.
no, but this meets the monument. This is for monuments. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like we looked at a monument. How can you, there's nothing in here about wall panels or there's glass.
Glass
Maybe,
walls down there on the next page, on page 3. It talks
I don't think
about
as a
glass
planning
walls.
commission we have authority over structure
How it's
and
built, yeah.
How it's built, right?
well, not how it's
Generally,
built, but what it
no,
looks
but,
like.
you know, what it looks like.
And
What
the
it looks like,
materials,
right, but-
materials used are listed here. I think we need to add steel, pre-finished, or steel panels, or something like that. That word ought to work into the conversation. And here's one that really caught my eye. On the top of page 3, it says, stucco or approved gypsum concrete. Gypsum concrete is not weatherproof, to the best of my knowledge. I mean, I've heard of Portland concrete, but gypsum concrete's what you use like on a roof deck where you're going to slope the roof, and then it's. I don't know where that word came from.
Yeah, so these might not be what we need.
Yeah.
If I don't know that we could be here for 3 more hours talking about the types and materials. Maybe Richard, if you have some suggestions, get it
put 'em
get
in
'em
a-
to us.
Email to you.
Yeah, or if
something.
anybody else has any thoughts about this. I mean, I think the intent is, we need some teeth so that it looks good when it comes here for a particular permit. These are a little dated. They're architect. I'm sure there are new materials out there that these don't address. I would suggest maybe focusing our efforts here tonight on, maybe keeping going, and if you have any comments about the architectural materials, then we can incorporate those, or provide some language at the bottom that says other similar aesthetically, architecturally interesting materials would be considered, something of that nature.
Yeah, it needs to be reworked, because it's talking about roof loads and curtain walls, and that's right out of the building.
Yeah.
This is not a building. So
Yeah.
that needs to be, I'll do an edited version.
That'd be great.
And send
Yeah.
it to you, and
Yeah.
we can throw darts at
We
it next
could
time.
use your help. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, where were we?
So
Okay,
now
so
we're on number
on
3,
page-
and this is where we talk about the 4,000 feet buffer. So, you know, I guess like we were just saying, I think that probably allows for 4 in the city. Let me just do a measurement here. If they're gonna do a measurement for
Boy,
me.
I don't know. Yeah, it'd be close. We got mile sections basically, right? So
Yeah.
Kill Creek to Lexington is probably a mile, and then from Lexington to Sunflower Road's not quite a mile though.
So it's a mile from the Super 8 to Kill Creek. Basically. So, yeah. So we could have 2 out here at the Kill Creek interchange and essentially 2 here by the Lexington interchange, conceivably. If you want to go on east to Cedar Creek, but I don't think any of that will ever be zoned commercial or
Right.
industrial. So that was kind of, and like I said, it cuts both ways. I mean, it reduces the proliferation of these things, but it also does cut the competition out a little bit for the first guy in.
Yeah.
I mean,
What's the farm zoned at? Kill Creek Farm? Is that?
it's zoned rural ag.
Okay.
Yeah, it's an agricultural zoning. And they've got a special use permit for their events and things. So everybody okay with the 4,000 feet? All right.
Yeah, what else do you do? I mean,
Yeah.
we don't want many of these things.
Right.
And in the foreseeable future, we've only got that one strip of land along there, and one sign's enough, and unfortunately, it's whoever shows up first.
That's the only weird part about it, is just first come, first serve. I mean, the first sign establishes the buffer, essentially. But that's not uncommon. You see that in other regulations.
Yeah.
So theoretically, if they put one next door to where Jake's Fireworks was going, be 4,000 feet that way and 4,000 feet that way, so
Right.
basically eliminates the rest of it.
Yeah.
Mile and 2 miles or whatever.
So you're down to 2.
Okay, so 4C talks about the KDOT permit. 4D talks about this where it talks about you got to engage in some discussions with the city to have some rotation. I don't know that there's any in terms of regulation. I think the version I have up here is a little different from the version you've got.
Yeah, yours is a little more expanded.
Yeah, this is. I think the version you have in your packets was like one. Patrick did a little tweaking to this, so this is actually the current. I'm gonna try and get it.
The one we don't have.
Yeah, you don't have it. Why on earth did it do that? Okay. Well, so if you want to read the screen there, must engage in good faith discussions with the city regarding agreements as to ways in which the applicant can partner with the city and other local organizations for the use and the benefit of the community. You know, we can't negotiate a contract in the text amendment, essentially.
Right, yeah,
That's
that
kind of what
requires
we're
them to, yeah.
trying to do. But it does put them on notice that there is a discussion with the council and that these use permits go to the council. So when the use permit comes to the council, then, you know, it will have to be accompanied by at least some, you know, maybe not a formal agreement, but, you know, this requirement that this discussion takes place. And maybe in the future for the third sign, we don't care.
Right.
But for the first one, I think we sure do.
I think that sounds good.
So there's
If
that.
we don't get it right the first time, we're in trouble after that.
Right. So size and height, we talk about this is the 672 square feet. So the DHM sign, the messaging portion of the DHM sign, and that's 14 by 48. I understand that's a real standard size for these things, and that's what a lot of the other ones are around. And so that's why 672 square feet. There's no other magic to that. That just comes from Mr. Hicks, from 4 years ago. It doesn't, I think Tim mentioned, really doesn't limit the size of the overall structure. I think that's probably something that we should consider doing, putting some overall structure size limit.
Well, they could have little buildings built on each side of it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think if it got ridiculous, that during the use permit process we'd back that off. But there's not really anything here, so.
Oh, the next one down says the total height cannot go past 35 feet, but it doesn't really say.
Doesn't describe.
Well,
it.
that's pretty good.
That's what
the
we're-
height, that's pretty good on the height. So, look, if there's a steel structure across the top holding the thing up, I don't know, 2 feet. Like, what is it they say? 1 in 30 is the span, typical span. So you're spanning 30 feet, you need a foot minimum. So something like that. So if we're spanning 48 feet, you're almost going to need 2 feet of structure. But I don't know the geometry of the sign, so I could see a 2-foot massive rectangle of steel across the top, a 12, 14-foot sign, a big massive steel at the bottom. But then they'll probably come back with it. They said they like the signs in a V too, I think.
Well, yeah, they're double-sided.
But
And
they're
so-
like V.
Yeah, they're not just flat.
They're not
typically.
flat. They're V-shaped. So that adds to the dynamics of the steel and the structure and where the pigeons can fly, and just it's beyond what we can put on paper.
Yeah.
Seen from a better angle viewing, that's okay.
So, the total height thing, yeah, we need to work through that. We need to figure that out. The rest of this illumination levels, you see most of this is black because this is just the stuff from the EVMB requirements that we've had in the regs for, I think it's about 10 years now. Talks about timing and changing of the symbol, no videos. There's some illumination restrictions for hours of the day.
You might look at the hours thing. We may put something in there. The only reason I say that, 500 feet's not a long ways if they end up close to a residential place. I don't know if you ever lived by like the cell phone towers, but on a foggy night when those things flash, it'll flash through your window like it's right outside, right? So if this sign's going off at, I don't know, just thinking 500 feet, maybe you want to say because if you say it's 1,000 feet or something, 1,000 feet probably gets you to the neighborhood behind Harps or close to it, assuming they're in that general area. I don't know if you
it's
want
less than 1,000, I'll bet.
Yeah,
I
I don't know.
bet it
I'm
is.
just
Depending on where they're
thinking
going to placement of the sign.
something you may want to put for consideration of hours. Of
Zenlers
operation.
live up across on the hill from
Just to,
K10. Boy, they'll get assuming this thing is right in front of Hart, or down the interstate in front of Harps. Zenler's up on the hill up there. I bet they get on a
so
foggy
I would
night.
just say that for special use permit submission, then there's some room for discussion if there's something.
Good
I don't
point,
know.
Todd.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Just a point for discussion. But nothing to dive into, just something to note for.
Discussion item.
Right.
Okay.
Or the people up on the hill above Hudamaki, where the new subdivision's gonna go.
Sorry, I lost my place here.
We're almost
There you are.
Okay.
That was all I saw.
All right. And then here we included language about obscene. That's just everybody's definition of obscene is different, but there's some state law that does give some guidance there. And I think that's it. Johnny, you asked about the location. I think this is a map from when we were considering the standalone city monument sign 8 or 10 years ago. We were going to put it, it's about 500 feet east of the Super 8, just kind of right about there. Of course, it would have gone in the K10 right of way. Mr. Hicks was thinking about the exact same spot.
That spot has got a natural.
Yeah, it's a natural mound.
Yeah.
It's just it's the right spot really for something like that. So that's kind of where.
I was on that committee that worked
Yeah.
on that sign.
And for
that's
curiosity-
where
First one.
we chose.
Yeah, this is
that
actually
sign.
the second version. We bid out a version in 2010 that looked like that with
Yeah.
Lexan panels, and so it bid out. I think the price on that one was over 100,000.
I think it was.
Yeah, and then we bid this one subsequently, and this total project was gonna be somewhere around 85,000. Now this was 10 years ago, so they're probably double that now.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's kind of that's what.
Now, Mike, what's the height of that? You don't remember?
I have the plans here. Let's see.
Oh, there it is.
8 feet maybe.
What's it?
Let me try and zoom in. Oh, sorry. Gotta get better at this.
I don't know, Mike. I've been pretty impressed the way you've been popping all over the place, looking at all those Google Maps. And
Oh, there it is. About 8. Yeah, 7 feet, 7.5 feet from there.
Wow, that's
The other end is
big.
probably 10.
So that would have to be at a high elevation so you could just see it from the highway.
Well, we decided that. I mean, we did those kind of the line studies, and
Right.
we did some legwork on that. And decided that, well, I guess it's 10 feet here at the face. 10 feet was plenty high to see it from the side, from the highway. Now you're not gonna be able to see it from Kill Creek.
Yeah. Well, the joke in Eudora is Dora when you go
Oh,
out there.
really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dora.
Yeah.
But you can't see the
It's
EU.
on the arch.
Yeah.
Oh,
When you
no.
come up, it
The
looks
way
like
they
Dora.
waved that one.
And that's what the
I'll have to
people.
pay attention.
How you like our sign, Dora?
Yeah.
Really?
Dora the Explorer.
It's a nice looking sign.
It is a nice
otherwise.
looking sign, but it's arched, and that's the
too
joke.
arched?
Scary we're thinking.
I thought
That's
it
the
was
joke.
Euphoria, but
No,
it's
no,
Dora.
it's a Dora. Dora.
You know, the reason I asked about wind load, they had a problem with that sign. Had to go back and redo part of it.
With that one, really?
Yeah.
Dora?
Which sign? Eudora
Eudora?
sign?
Yeah.
Oh, did they really?
I mean, it looks nice.
Yeah, it
you know,
looks
but-
good.
So-
Just doesn't read well.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so who's comfortable calling a public hearing for the next meeting?
I don't think so.
No.
Opinion.
I'm not
Okay.
quite ready.
I don't.
Okay, so we'll have it as a discussion item then at the next. I don't think there is a big urgent hurry over it.
I don't think this is one thing that we need to rush into. Or
I
rush
don't
through.
So we'll bring it back for a discussion item and talk through
One,
this.
one little thing, reading this last line on this thing that you have written on here, it says, the message board within line of sight of any traffic control or safety devices shall be subject to approval by the city engineer. You could use that same verbiage basically within line of sight of existing businesses or signages shall be subject to review by the planning commission or somebody. We're trying to find some way to get the actual
Yeah.
verbiage
Yeah.
in there to have a review of, are you blocking something that you shouldn't be blocking? I don't know, just possible.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
a-
good language.
That's a good lawyer's
Yeah.
line right there to
That
cover
kind
it.
of,
I think it is.
Mike, doesn't it?
If there is,
Yeah.
if there is one beautiful thing about this, it is that the same person sort of controls the land around it. That's proposing it, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
And so when he goes to sell this piece of property, disclose that, hey, you got to put, you're building here, but there's probably going to be a sign right here.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Well, that would be part of the
I just got a
disclosure
text from
agreement.
Rob. He says the Eudora sign is 75 feet wide.
Oh, no.
75
Says-
feet wide?
He said that's what it says. Eudora sign is 75 feet wide. Mr. Zimmerman measured.
What kind of does that?
It's on good authority.
Yeah, it's,
Yeah.
Couldn't it do
Mr.
this?
Zimmerman did it.
It's,
no, it curves.
Well, it curves that way, but aren't there like
Trust
like
anybody.
things that come out to, I don't know.
Let's
Well,
see
Mike-
if it's on.
Mike's gonna look it up.
Yeah, Mike's
Is that where it is? There it is.
75
Yeah, there it is.
feet.
There's the Dora
yeah,
sign.
that's
Let's
pretty
measure.
big.
Well,
Too bad we can't measure. Can we measure how tall it is?
I know that sign.
what's that say? 66. So
Pretty close, yeah.
yeah, 60, 70. Yep.
Anybody know the corporate woods sign right off 435, driving along there to the right?
Mm-hmm.
That is a monster. That thing is like 16 feet. It's a big pylon that says corporate woods. That's like 60 feet wide and almost 18 feet tall, something like that. It's a monster. You can go to you can pan to that, Mike.
Where is it?
Go to I-35 between Metcalf and Lamar, right?
430.
435.
Or 435. Corporate Woods. Yeah, I think it's
Antioch.
right. Antioch. Okay. Let's see. Is that Antioch?
That's 69 Highway.
Okay, it's east of there,
Keep going east. That's
East.
west.
other way.
The other east.
Oh.
Oh, did that say Corporate Woods?
Yeah,
Yeah,
this-
that said Corporate Woods right there.
All right, it's right.
Is it along
It's a
435?
big pylon or big monument sign. See that bluish.
What's that, something creek?
Indian Creek.
See
Indian
the creek? Go. I think that's it, right?
This guy?
That. What's
Oh,
the
there it is.
distance of that? Or I think that's.
It's wild.
53 feet.
53. All right.
Well, it's not as big as the Eudora.
Not as big as.
It's closer to the highway, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you think when you drive by and all the trees and everything,
Yeah.
it's, it doesn't look too big, but
It's closer to the...
now if it's in my backyard, it'd be way too big.
That big. There you go. That's
There it is, yeah, all right,
Good job, Mike.
There it is, 53 feet.
yeah. And it's taller than you think. Can you zoom into the base of that thing? Okay, it is on stilts.
A little bit. Bushes are trying to hide it.
If it's good enough for Corporate Woods, maybe it's good enough for us. Okay.
All right.
All right.
Well, good discussion. Yeah.
All right. Say what you think. Say what you feel.
I think we've got a lot of work left to do.
I agree.
I think we need to work out between monument and structure. Say what you feel.
I agree, we need to get it worked out right this time.
All right. Anybody else got anything? Should we close the meeting?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
We got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay.
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, man. Woo. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you. Yeah, that's good work, guys. Let me turn the video off
Yeah.
before anybody gets carried away.